themselves in a respectful, courteous manner, both with the board and fellow residents. At any time, should any member of the board or any resident fail to observe the public charge, the chair will ask the offending person to leave the meeting until that individual regains personal control. Should decorum fail to be restored, the chair will recess the meeting until such time that a genuine commitment to the public charge is observed. Commissioner Burton, would you like to lead the land acknowledgement?
Yes, thank you so much. As we convene for the Durham County Commissioners meeting, it's crucial to recognize the painful truth of history. We stand on the stolen ancestral lands of the Catawba, Eno, Occaneechi, Shikori, and Tuscaroras peoples, whose deep connection to this land predates our arrival. Excuse me. We acknowledge with humility the unjust displacement and violence that occurred leading to this dispossession of indigenous peoples from their homelands. Their resilience in the face of such adversity is a testament to their strength and spirit. May we humbly honor the ancestors and elders of these nations, both past and present, by committing ourselves to fostering understanding, healing, and justice for all who inhabit this land. Let us walk forward together with open hearts, acknowledging the past and embracing a future guided by compassion, respect, and unity.
Thank you, Commissioner Burton. We'll now move to our resident comments, and we have one individual signed up. Antoinette Hawes, if you can come to this microphone over on the left. And please remember to turn on the microphone and you'll have 3 minutes to speak.
Good morning, my name is Antoinette Hawes. I live at 5610 Catskill Court. I've been a Durham resident all my life. And I started paying county taxes September 25th, 1997. So when I say I'm not happy that my taxes went up $1,254, I'm not happy. And I'm not happy with the quality of service that the community is getting from this board and its leadership. We were kicked out as a community of the Durham County Directors Social Services Board meeting, which Valentine was conveniently unpresent. I feel like we were set up, and I feel like you have misrepresented yourself to the community, and we can show you better than we can tell you. I want to let you know that everybody sitting on this board better look at that seat and find some kind of understanding that we, the people, are fed up, and we are getting pushed at both sides, and we're not going to take it. And you are here at the pleasure of the people. And if you cannot serve your community, then we don't need you here. Let me say it again. You are here at the pleasure of the people. And if you do not serve the citizens of Durham County, you can go do something else with somebody else. Thank you. I will not be staying for the remainder of the meeting because I feel like what you say and what you do are two different things. And the community is empowered. And we're going to make sure that we have representation that we need for everyone in this community.
Thank you. I will pass it to Manager Hager for our consent agenda. Oh. Yes.
Madam Chair, I just wanted to, I know we don't usually comment during citizen comments, but I do want to recognize that there is a voice that's missing who usually participates in almost, I would say, every single opportunity for comments to our board, and that is Mr. DeWarren Langley. And so I just really wanted to take a moment to just recognize that he has been an unrelentless voice in this community for our youth and has always pushed all of us to do better. And I just want to say that his voice will be missed at our meetings regularly, and that he will be sorely missed in this community, and that his legacy of impacting the lives of many, many young people will continue. and I know that our board will be recognizing him as well in the future, but I just wanted to really mention it because he is one of the people who always is participating in our meetings and giving input. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Jacobs. Commissioner Burton?
Thank you for saying that, Commissioner Jacobs. I just saw Mr. Langley at our Workforce Development Board not even a week ago, and he was very committed to making sure that there were opportunities for our young people. There were opportunities for our young people to get skills, get into the workforce, and he was there, and the next thing you know, hearing of his passing, it was very shocking. So we really want to send condolences to his family, and he will be deeply missed here in Durham. He was a lifelong Durhamite, so he will be deeply missed. So thank you for saying that.
Thank you.
Madam
Commissioner
Chair?
Alton? Yes.
Yes, so thank you. And I ditto the sentiments of my colleagues, and I extend condolences to Doran's family. As the founder of the Charles Hamilton Houston Foundation, he was committed to the young people in this community, and his voice will be missed, and I dare say that he was a champion for the young people in our community, and so may he rest in peace.
Thank you. Thank you, Commissioner Jacobs, for bringing Doran's name. Yet the board will be putting together a proclamation honoring Doran and all the ways that he has served the community here in Durham through different boards and commissions and advocacy and through his nonprofit at our future regular session. Thank you. Manager Hager?
Before I start the consent agenda, I would also like to make some remarks about DeWarren. It feels a little odd that he's not on the line or sending us an email this morning, reminding us how we can become different in what we do. So my condolences to his family. I've known DeWarren since 1997, quite a long time, and he's always been consistent and was always a champion. So may he rest in peace. As we transition to the consent agenda, the first item is 250510. This is Budget Ordinance Amendment 21 for the public health to recognize $3,124 from the North Carolina Department of Health and Human Services Division of Public Health Epidemiology Communicable Disease Branch to expand disease surveillance. The next agenda item is 25. Okay, a question?
I just had a quick question, and seeing that our public health director is here, what is the current status of our COVID vaccines and just our capacity and our access?
Thank you so much. Good morning to the commissioners and the community. We continue to work our way through a very difficult time that should be a very easy time when it comes to vaccines. As it stands right now, we do know that adult vaccines are available, but the problem is pediatric vaccines. We're still waiting on the word approval from the CDC director for Vaccines for Children, our program that allows us to administer vaccines, particularly the COVID vaccine. As it stands right now, we do feel, or some are saying, that with the government shutdown, that is likely to not necessarily happen because, as we all know, we have an interim CDC director. So it continues to be a very sad time. We have received a number of comments from the community as it relates to pediatric vaccines. 90% of adults go to their primary care physicians and or CVS or retail pharmacies to receive their COVID vaccines. You have to declare from a laundry list of ailments. Whether true or not, that's up to you, but you can get your vaccine there. But Durham County Department of Public Health, we stand prepared to be able to do it when the state authorizes us to. So I hope that answers your question.
Thank you. And I did not realize the issue with pediatric vaccines. That's really concerning.
Very much so.
Yeah. Thank you.
Yes.
The next item is 250513. This is to approve budget ordinance amendment 26 OPA 002 for the opioid fund to reallocate $20,373 of previously approved opioid settlement funds from the syringe project strategy to the naloxone project strategy. Commissioner Jacobs.
Yeah, I am on the opioid advisory committee, and I just wanted to hear what was the reasoning for the transferring of these funds from one use to another, going from syringe to naloxone, just to get a little more information about why.
Thank you again, Dr. Rod Jenkins, Public Health Director. It is my understanding that additional funds are being needed for the naloxone project, commissioners, primarily because, for a good reason. We certainly are starting to see the results of the opioid epidemic starting to decelerate, so to speak. So funds are needed in order to distribute naloxone. I received a report maybe about 2 weeks ago at Durham's Pride Festival from our team that said that we are administering naloxone way above what we anticipated. So as a direct result, to fill the 2 machines that we have, one at the detention center, one at the public health center, and 2 that are scheduled to arrive here in Durham, we certainly need to prepare these funds in order to stock it properly.
Thank you.
And do we know where those 2 new ones are going to be located yet?
I'm sorry, Madam Chair?
Do we know where the 2 new machines are going to be located?
I know one is scheduled to be at the main library. The other one escapes me, but I'll be happy to get that information for you.
I'm really glad about the main library because I know that's something that I've heard from the community as well as library employees of wanting to have that resource there.
Absolutely.
Yeah, thank you.
All right. The next item is 250514. This is an approval to extend the existing interlocal cooperation agreement with the City of Durham to contract for a joint crisis communications plan to December 31st, 2026. The next item is 250516. This is a budget ordinance amendment to recognize $6,000 from the Department of Health and Human Services to implement the electronic test ordering and results system. The next item is 250521. This is to approve a memorandum of agreement with Central Pines Regional Council in the amount of $1,861.78 to provide planning and technical assistance for the Triangle Region Solid Waste Consortium. This next one is a novel. This is 250526. This is approval of a capital project amendment and budget ordinance amendment, decreasing the open space and farmland preservation capital project by $80,300 and transferring that funding to the general fund to support the purchase of a 25-acre conservation easement of Tilly Farm from Wesley and Kristen Poole, as well as recognizing $213,000 from the Army's National Guard's Readiness and Environmental Protection Integration Program to support the purchase of the easement.
Yeah, I just wanted someone to explain about the National Guard's Readiness and Environmental Protection Integration, like what's that about?
Sure.
Yeah,
Right.
just more detail, that's all.
Fantastic. Our open space and real estate manager, Celeste Burns, will share.
we go. Good morning. Celeste Burns, Durham County Open Space and Real Estate. The REPI program is kind of an environmental protection program that supports protection of military installations. So in the case of Durham County, Camp Butner is in the northeastern part of the county. We have a cooperative agreement with the National Guard to protect land within a 1-mile buffer around that. So that cooperative agreement's been in place, I think, since 2022. So we have an opportunity to get that federal funding for that to prevent residential development in that area. There is still an active shooting range in that area, and they want to protect that, so the neighbors are happy.
Yeah, I just wanted some clarification. That helps. Thank you so much.
I just want to recognize and applaud open space staff for securing 75% of the funding from outside sources for this project. Thank you so much.
Okay, the next item is 250527. This is to approve committing energy efficiency and renewable energy rebates and incentive funding toward projects that further the county's renewable energy and greenhouse gas emissions goal.
Well, first of all, I support the creation of this fund. I just wanted to ask, when, maybe Tobin can tell us, when was the last time you reported to us just overall, like, how we're doing on our plan and our goals? Do we get an annual report from you, or I just don't remember when the last time we actually heard from you in detail about.
Thank you. Tobin Freed, Sustainability Manager. It has been a while. I don't remember the last time I did. So we'll prepare that. I'd be happy to come back and share that with you.
Okay, yeah, I would just say to Madam Manager, if we could make sure we at least get on an annual basis, you know, because like this item, honestly, would have been great if we had had this up as a presentation, and then you could give us a report at the same time.
Sure.
So if we could make sure we do that soon and do that annually, that would be great.
I'd be happy to. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
I'm sure Perry is very excited for this fund to add all his solar panels to our parking decks.
Okay, the next item is 250535. This is an agreement, revisions to the Historic Preservation Commission's interlocal cooperation agreement. Okay, the next item is 250538. This is authorization to amend the design contract with R&D Architects, PA, for design development and construction administration services for the Stanford L. Warren Interior Upgrades project in the amount of $14,470. The contract revised amount will be $242,669.
Manager Hager, I was just wondering, because I know that Stanford L. Warren, it's been 1 year now since we,
Yes.
So is this not something that, like, with the construction, the team that had done this building, that there should have been some sort of inspections that would have prevented this?
Well, Joel Jones, the project manager, will share, and it's not uncommon sometimes when we have projects that are completed, we may need to do some refinement, but Joel can walk through that.
Thank you. Yes, Joel Jones, project manager, engineering. So December will be 1 year for the opening of Stanford L. Warren. And right before we opened up last year, we found water that was seeping into the stairwell on the lower level. And this was due to some improper application of waterproofing membrane that was applied back during the 2004 renovation. So we found it. We said we need to address it. The architect, R&D architects, they came on board since they were already there and designed a solution for it. We saw that through with the contractor, Muter Construction. Basically, in good faith, they kept going and designed a solution for us, and now we're just trying to make it right with them.
Oh, so this is to pay for it. So they already made the repair, and this is to pay it now. So it's not a new leak.
No.
Oh,
no.
okay. Okay, that's helpful. Thank you.
Okay, we are moving a little faster than planned this morning.
Don't jinx it. Wonderful. So now we are to our discussion items. Do we have, I don't think she's here yet.
And the public defender was planning to be here a few minutes later,
yeah.
so we can, are all of the planning staff available? Can y'all do your item now?
Yeah, so we'll start with, do you want to start with the Durham to Roxborough Rail Trail, or do you want to start with the planning items?
We can start with the planning item.
So we'll go to 25-0536, informational to consolidated annexation Hamlin Reserve. And you can come sit here at the table since it's presentation, right? Yeah. And we have 20 minutes allocated for this one. Do you think 10 minutes presentation, 10 minutes questions? Okay, perfect.
Awesome, thank you. Yep, all right, technology works. Good morning, my name is Andy Lester with the Planning and Development Department. I'm here to present the annexation case for you, Hamlin Reserve, and it's good to be with you all this morning. And as a reminder, on September 4th, 2024, the Joint City-County Planning Committee directed staff to present annexation cases that are outside the urban growth boundary to the Board of County Commissioners, both before the requests are acted upon by City Council. The intent of the presentation is just to inform the BOCC of such requests and to receive their comments so that they can be incorporated into the staff report for City Council. Some particulars of the case. This is an annexation for 2503 and 2523 Hamlin Road. 2 acres consisting of 42.68 acres, or 61 acres. The request is to rezone residential rural county jurisdiction to residential rural city jurisdiction. The proposal is actually for 81 single-family residences. My apologies for the error in the presentation. But those 81 single-family residences would be built through the use of a conservation subdivision through the City of Durham. With this map, it shows the existing zoning. This is a direct translational zoning of residential rural from the county to the city. A direct translational zoning is one in which the existing Durham County zoning is translated into the identical Durham City zoning district upon the annexation of the property into the city limits. A translational zoning does not and cannot include a development plan, and any future development may proceed according to what the zoning would allow. This aerial map shows the general location of the project. The site fronts Hamlin Road and is generally surrounded by agricultural uses to the east, west, and south. To the north is the Army Corps of Engineers property. The properties are currently designated rural and agricultural reserve on the place type map and are outside the urban growth boundary of the comprehensive plan. The annexation outside the UGB is inconsistent with the comprehensive plan. If the proposed zoning is approved, staff recommends a change to the place type map to designate this property as mixed residential neighborhood. If the proposal is approved, the comprehensive plan would be automatically amended to extend the urban growth boundary to incorporate the parcel. That extension of the UGB would also include a portion of the Army Corps of Engineers parcel with Reed 169, 168. That is not part of the proposal. Neighborhood meetings were held in accordance with the neighborhood meeting guidelines on May 13th, 2025 and July 14th, 2025. The attendees of those many meetings were 11 and 0 respectively. 6 comments have been received by staff in relation to the case on the Durham Rezoning Explorer. All comments have been against the proposal. The proposal is inconsistent with the place type map designation of rural and agricultural reserve because the place type is not intended to be located within the urban growth boundary. If the proposal is approved, the comprehensive plan would be automatically amended to extend the UGB to incorporate the parcel. If the proposal is approved, staff recommends a change to the place type map designation to a mixed residential neighborhood. The proposal could accommodate various housing types if the conservation subdivision is utilized, which makes the recommended MRN place type the most appropriate for the site. The proposal is consistent with 3 of the 7 applicable comprehensive plan policies. And on August 12th, 2025, the Durham Planning Commission recommended denial by a vote of 11 to 0. And regarding next steps, commissioners may provide comments on the proposed annexation that will be incorporated into the staff report. And staff will need those written comments by October 13th. And the case is tentatively scheduled for the November 17th City Council meeting. And with that, the presentation is concluded. And staff, and I believe, hopefully the applicant is here for any questions.
Thank you so much. I see we have hands going up. So just for clarification, so it's going to November 17th to the City Council. This is not going to come to the commissioners for a vote. We just provide our comments, right?
Correct.
Yes. Okay.
Yep.
Thank you. Commissioner Burton?
Yes, thank you, Chair Lam. The question, I didn't have a chance to drive down that road yesterday. I live not too far from that area. I wanted to know, from this location, how far is it from the DPS transportation lots and the elementary schools, the middle school, School of Creative Studies?
I'm sorry, I do not know that right off the hand.
Oh, you don't? Is it like right down the street, or is it?
Should be right between the two.
It's right between the two.
It should be like almost dead center between the two of those.
Okay, all right.
Based on this map.
Okay, yeah, I'm just trying to get my bearings straight. Okay,
Sure.
thank you.
And then another question I had was, is that Commissioner Burton? Okay. Do we know how, for this size of development, since it's outside of the urban growth boundary and we'll obviously have to connect to city and county resources for this amount of like population growth, how much are resources in providing police or sheriff's protection, EMS services would need to grow, and how that's included in the application?
Yeah, so there's a fiscal impact analysis that's done for all annexations. I would need to look at the actual FIA regarding that, but that is taken into account in regards to how police can serve this site along with fire, solid waste, planning, transportation, and such.
Thank
So
you.
I can send you that. I can send you the FIA to show you those numbers.
That'd be great. Thank you.
Sure.
Okay. Commissioner Valentine?
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. So I had talked, I'm actually talking to my colleagues right now regarding this matter. I've talked extensively about the planning department and the need for this body to consider the county taking back its equities and authorities. And so here's an example where a case is coming before us for basically information purposes. Yes, it's true that we can provide information, but we have people that we represent in the county. And so these decisions are primarily being handed over to the city. And I am 100% against that. And I think we should consider our current arrangement as it relates particularly to annexations and our inability to speak directly to this question. Now I have a question for you, and thank you for your presentation today.
Sure.
So this project is outside the urban growth boundary, is that correct?
Correct.
And so that means that if this project is approved by the city, that will become the norm, is that correct?
Not necessarily. Each annexation rezoning is on a case-by-case basis.
Okay. So not necessarily is your answer? I mean, because if you're setting the precedence, I believe that more projects will be approved down the road that are outside the urban growth boundary, which is inconsistent with the comprehensive plan, if my understanding is correct.
No, I guess I don't agree with that. Each decision is ultimately done by the city council.
Yes.
We cannot reject any application that comes forward. So we will still accept applications and review against the comprehensive plan policies, and we will provide that information to city council, and it's their discretion that sort of sets the precedent.
Thank you.
Sure.
And just to provide clarification, because of listening to the presentation, so the Planning Commission has voted against this 11-0, but staff hasn't made a recommendation.
We don't make formal recommendations for annexations or rezonings.
Commissioner Jacobs?
Yes, I do want to emphasize the staff report states very clearly that this proposed rezoning is not consistent with our comprehensive land use plan, our future place type map, and is inconsistent with 3 out of 7 of the comprehensive land use policies. And the staff report is very clear about that. So first of all, I want to just speak in a broader sense that this, I agree with what you were saying, Commissioner Valentine. We just created a new comprehensive land use plan 2 years ago. And this was an outcome of many years of community input. The first time we revised our plan in more than 20 years. And it is very important that we stick to our comprehensive land use plan. So when we don't uphold the plan, and we don't uphold our urban growth boundary, we are undermining the validity of our entire plan, to your point, Commissioner Valentine. So this is very serious. It is not just a one-off. And if we're going to be serious about sticking to what we said that we were going to do, it is really critical that we uphold our plan. And I will be very strongly opposing this in my comments. We have made a decision in this community that we are going to densely develop within the urban growth boundary, and the trade-off is that we are going to respect and uphold our urban growth boundary unless there is rationale for public health reasons or environmental reasons. That is the policy, the guidelines that we have for not upholding the urban growth boundary. And it's a slippery slope if we do not honor that. This property can be developed. It can be developed within the current zoning for 40 units. It can be developed as a conservation subdivision within the current zoning. And I really value the comments we got from the Planning Commission members. Also, looking at the policies, I appreciate the staff report. Looking at all of the comp plan policies, really appreciate that. I found that extremely helpful. And I do want to follow up on a comment that Chair Alam made. And this is the first time that we are actually getting our opportunity to review rezonings outside of the urban growth boundary. So I also appreciate this being brought to us, at least for input. But in the future, I would like to make sure that we get the cost-benefit analysis that was done. I'm also concerned, though, that that doesn't necessarily impact to county services, which would be EMS. I know the schools are included, which is county funding, but could you clarify, is EMS included in that cost-benefit analysis?
Currently, they are not. I know that staff has had preliminary conversations with the EMS. That's to that extent.
Okay, so I'd like to ask our county manager if we could help to facilitate that, because this has been an ongoing issue for quite a while. I know that our planning staff has been trying to collaborate with EMS on this, and so we need to make sure that that information is included and for the planning staff to do that analysis. And I don't know any other pertinent county services beyond EMS that I can think of, but certainly that.
We will follow up to ensure
Yes,
that happens.
yes, okay. Thank you so much.
Commissioner Burton, then Vice Chair Dr. Lee.
Yeah, and that's one of the reasons why I wanted to know where the, because I've traveled that road so long, so many times, you know, having this discussion, where it was in relation to the school and to the DPS transportation, because I know that's a pretty rural road. And thinking about, I know my colleagues asked the questions really eloquently, thinking about travel time, EMS, sheriff, if it's in the city, you know, police, all those things to get out there to do this, the things that needs to be done, the sewer and all of those things. And I appreciate you, Commissioner Jacobs and Chair Alam, articulating that, because, you know, being a visual person, having to see things and where they are in relation, realizing what would need to be done to get those services out there. So thank you so much for that.
I agree with my colleagues here, but my question is more on a kind of a slightly different. As these things come to us, what authorities do we have in advocating for infrastructure changes for like these new projects and so forth? Hamlin Road is a very thin road. It is like, it's 2 lanes. Right, all the way out to where Creative Studies is. Yeah, Red Mill Road, yeah. And you know, Commissioner Valentine knows that very well because he lives right off of Hamlin Road. But in this proposal, and I do appreciate the comments from the Planning Commission and so forth, but do we have any input on, if this was approved, you know, by the City Council, the improvements to infrastructure out there? Because it seems there's a lot of places in Durham where building has happened, but infrastructure changes are not happening. There's, I live off of Danube Lane, out by the Independence Park, and there's been a lot of apartment complexes and townhomes and things, but none of the streets have been extended, you know, widened. The only really improvement has been the traffic circle right there at Carver and Danube. But so traffic, I've been in that house since 2006. And the number of dwellings has increased tenfold over there, but the infrastructure hasn't changed. What input do we have on infrastructure improvements as these type of projects are being considered, proposals are being considered, or do we have any input on that?
Sure. I guess let me address, there's 2 main points. When it comes to infrastructure improvements, the majority of them are driven by private investment. So if this is approved, and then there is a site plan that comes in to the planning staff, the applicant would be required to make road improvements only to the adjacent portions of their property. So whatever NCDOT requires of them regarding Hamlin Road in front of their property, the applicant would be required to make that investment. To your larger concern of just sort of infrastructure projects in general, I believe most of that is either taken through the state STIP process, which is sort of larger projects, infrastructure, and there's a public engagement regarding that, but I think NCDOT dictates sort of the priorities of those infrastructure projects. Within the city, there are CIP processes, capital improvement projects that are debated on by city council, and that's another avenue in which infrastructure could be upgraded over time. So you have all those things working at once. In the STIP projects, there is engagement for input. I believe in the CIP process, there's engagement. So hopefully that helps the context.
Thank you.
Commissioner Jacobs? And then this is the last comment.
I just wanted to follow up on Vice Chair Dr. Lee's comments. You know, for quite a while, there was originally request when Matthew Palmer was over facilities at Durham Public Schools. He had asked that we form a work group with staff between the city, the county, and Durham Public Schools to really to work together and collaborate and coordinate around this issue of infrastructure. And I mean, I completely agree with you that we see this is the big issue that we hear about, especially people in East Durham, where there's been a lot of new development, that people feel like there isn't the infrastructure to support it. So I do think it's really important that we get that group going and to see how we can all work together and coordinate around this issue. Because it's a chicken and egg situation as we implement our new UDO and our comprehensive land use plan. We want to have denser development within the urban growth boundary, and we want to create more walkable, transit-friendly communities, but how do we do that when we're building new housing and the infrastructure is not there? I knew we did at our joint city-county meeting last week, we looked at some of the new road cross-sections, which are really exciting, which developers will be required to implement, that will have complete streets, but it's going to be kind of like a piecemeal. We'll end up with how we have these sidewalk apps, and how we're going to have that with streets. So I guess this is all to say, to your point, which is a really important point, that we really need to get that infrastructure group going between all of us. So, yeah, thank you.
Yeah, and I believe I've talked to Sarah about this. If we could also, I don't know if the planning department has been able to get together that table of like how our population grows year by year and how our service, our ability to provide services is growing, and to show, are we able to keep up with the growth that we have here in Durham at the same time of like our police and sheriff services, our EMS, our school seats. So we can map that out to show, and that's not just on planning department, but that's also how are we as city and county funding these programs at the same rate at our growth. So I guess I'll give that as a follow-up to Manager Hager. She can get that back to us. And
yeah, we will definitely follow up on that. And I will say in some spaces we've not kept up with growth. One example is in this past budget, we funded a new EMS group, and so we had not done that in about 7 years, but we've been growing incrementally over that time period, at least 1% to 2% from a population perspective per year. So those are areas that we all need to think about as we plan for our budgets, and in these areas where there's an intersection with the overall growth process, that there's more intentionality.
yeah, and definitely bringing the city into those conversations, because they are the ones who approve a lot of these. Well, thank you so much. I appreciate it. And I know Since we have Chief Don Baxton here, Chief Defender, are we okay with planning staff if we move back to that presentation? So,
Yes.
No, because we have like 3 and they're going to be long, so unless you like talking about zoning.
This worked out perfect because I knew the other ones were long.
Yes.
So.
Oh, you have to press the button. And Ms. Baxton, so we have 45 minutes allocated for this. Do you think 30 minutes presentation, 15 minutes questions will be good?
Yes.
Thank you.
Righty, good morning. Thank you for having me. So I will get right into it because I understand you guys are very busy. So we're going to try this. So just to give you a little history of the Durham County Public Defender's Office, it was created in 1990 with 8 public defenders. Since its creation, there have been 3 chief public defenders in the history of that office, the first being Mr. Robert Brown Jr., Lawrence Campbell being the second, and myself being appointed as the 3rd public defender. The public defender is appointed to a 4-year term by the senior resident Superior Court judge. In terms of funding for the Public Defender's Office, pursuant to North Carolina General Statute 7A302, the county is responsible for providing the physical facilities for the Public Defender's Office. Since 1990, the Public Defender's Office has been housed in the courthouse of Durham County. That duty also extends to providing adequate storage space for the confidential files that are required to be retained under the rules of professional responsibility. Another source of funding is the North Carolina General Assembly. It created the Indigent Defense Services in 2001 to oversee representation of indigent persons throughout the state of North Carolina, and it is this body that advocates for adequate funding for existing public defender's office, for the creation of new public defender offices in areas where there is a need, as well as advocating for an increased rate to have PAC attorneys adequately compensated for their services. Currently, the structure of the public defender office under me, I have myself, and then I have 2 senior assistants, one assigned to look over Superior Court and the other for District Court. The Superior Court senior assistant is responsible for supervising the Superior Court attorneys, the investigators, the interpreter, and the social worker. And the District Court senior assistant is responsible for supervising the District Court attorneys and the legal assistants. In terms of staffing, currently we have 22 assistant public defenders that is funded by North Carolina, and then we have 2 assistant public defenders that is funded by the county. We have 6 legal assistants, 2 investigators, 1 interpreter, and 1 social worker that is dedicated to the attorneys that handle our abuse, neglect, and dependency cases. In terms of the areas that we are tasked with representing persons, we represent persons charged with all traffic offenses where there's a possibility of exposure to incarceration. That includes those cases like driving while license revoked, DWI, and driving while license revoked, impaired driving. We also represent persons in all misdemeanors and felony offenses where there is exposure to incarceration. Juvenile cases, we have 2 attorneys that are dedicated to that specifically. We also have 2 attorneys that are dedicated to representing parents in abuse, neglect, and dependency cases. We also have an attorney that is assigned, in addition to their regular criminal work, to representing persons who have been involuntarily committed. We assist when called upon by the court to represent those parents in military child support cases, civil domestic matters, generally contempt of a parent when they have not been following the rules of the court and cannot afford a lawyer, and post-release violations. We also have a presence at first appearance, although it's not considered to be, in some areas, an important process. We consider it to be very important in representing the clients. So we have been at first appearances, and that presence is funded by the county. We also have an attorney who is assigned to mental health court, one who is assigned to drug treatment court, and we have an attorney who works in a collaboration with the stakeholders for Safe Babies Court. We also are responsible for maintaining a list of private assigned counsel that can represent persons in special proceedings, child support proceedings, estates, family law contempt, conflict cases in criminal, juvenile, and abuse, neglect, dependency court, and motions for appropriate relief when the court deems that person should be assigned an attorney for that purpose. Some of the challenges that we are currently facing with the implementation of e-courts, it has caused the workspace for our support staff to no longer be adequate based on the extra equipment that is needed for them to perform their tasks adequately. We continue to struggle with having sufficient physical and digital storage space for the files that we are required to maintain under law, and we are bracing for how we are going to deal with effectively and efficiently representing clients that will be incarcerated longer, likely due to the implementation of the new crime bill. Questions?
Wow, even better. Thank you so much. I have one question before I come to the commissioners. Around the shortage in staffing that you were mentioning earlier, we hear a lot about, the cases around child welfare cases, and I know you and I have talked about this extensively. How does that, obviously we know it anecdotally, but how does that impact the timeline of how these cases are heard and how long families are waiting to have their day, and how it impacts how long it takes to reunify a family?
It takes too long in Durham County to reunify families. The cases take a very long time to work its way through court. The dockets are heavy. There's not enough sessions to cover all of the cases that are pending before the court. The parents have to go through a lot of things to try to get their children back. One of the issues with Safe Babies while we were collaborating is that it's supposed to assist in reunifying parents with their children sooner by making sure the parents are getting the resources they need to become a better parent and be reunified with their child. But we still have a problem with not enough time to deal with all the cases, which results in children being away from their parents way too long.
Yeah. And in addition to obviously more staffing to handle these cases, are there any other best practices you've seen in other communities that have been able to really improve the timeline of family reunification within the court systems?
Yes. Prior to me becoming chief public defender some years ago, there used to be a family drug treatment court that dealt with those cases, and we did see significant improvement in times of how long the cases took in terms of families being reunited, parents getting the resources they needed sooner. It was a very, very successful court that was defunded, unfortunately. And since that time, there hasn't been anything to replace that. But that was the most effective tool that we had at the time to help reunify families quicker in that courtroom.
Great. And I know we've talked about that court, and I serve on the name changes.
Criminal Justice
the Justice Advisory Council.
Yes.
We serve on that together, and that's come up in those conversations as well. Do you think, and it doesn't have to be now, but like in the future you could email us, like if there's any staff that have done the calculation of since that court ended, how much longer a family reunification case has extended? Like if it used to be, I'm making up numbers, like within a month the family was reunified versus now without this court, how much longer? That would be, I think, really beneficial for us. And I guess to Manager Hager, if we can have conversations, because this is something that we've heard not just from the child welfare space, but also just our entire justice system in general, of a very vital system and program that we had as we gear up for our budget for next year, of how much would it cost for us, because that was a locally funded program and we didn't have state funding, to reopen the Family Justice Court. That would be really, really, I think, impactful for so many residents.
So we definitely can look at historical costs that were associated with the court. I know the district attorney also brought this up in her conversation a couple of months ago, so that staff will follow up.
Thank you. Commissioner Jacobs?
Well, thank you so much for being with us and presenting to us. I think this is the first time
maybe second.
Second? Okay.
Kind of happens when we have like a really, really new.
Okay, a long time ago.
Board,
Maybe
yes.
when you were requesting some locally funded positions. I don't know. It's been a long time.
Mm-hmm.
So thank you for being here and for the work that you do. I was wondering what, with your current staffing, what is your capacity and what, in terms of serving all the people that you need to represent and what your caseloads are like? Could you tell us a little bit about that?
Yes. We just got numbers in terms of the number of cases that we disposed of for the fiscal year 24-25, and it was 8,408 cases that we disposed of. That is in light of things taking a little longer than usual. Prior to COVID, we were disposing of anywhere from 15 to 10,000 cases. But it is our responsibility, or my responsibility, to make sure that the citizens are getting effective representation and quality representation. So we're not treating people as widgets that need to hurry through the system. We're making sure that we're doing the absolute best that we can to get the best result for them. But I only have 24 attorneys, 25 with me.
Yeah.
And so managing their caseloads to make sure that they are not overwhelmed, that they can still be effective and have a life outside of work is challenging, but we do what we can. Certainly more attorneys will have more cases, less. We can spread out the workload a little better. Like Wake County has 30 attorneys. That's great. But 24 for what we need to do in this county and the caseload is not enough.
Okay, thank you. And also understanding, again, as Chair Alam mentioned, it's a system.
Mm-hmm.
And so you're also impacted what district attorneys do and what type of evidence or lack of evidence there is provided.
Mm-hmm.
So there are a lot of things that affect your work. And now you mentioned the e-courts, which is a good thing because we want to, I think, reduce. I know one of the barriers that I've heard the district court, chief district court judge talk about, Clayton Jones, is trying to get first appearance done virtually to help parents, looking at some of the barriers that can be there for people. So is there anything that can be done in the courthouse? You talked about lacking room and storage. Are there any solutions short term with any of those things that we may be able to facilitate with our general services staff?
Yeah, short term, I've reached out to, God, I cannot remember his name, but he came and looked at the workspace where my support staff is currently to see if we could reconfigure it to give them more desk space. I know he was a little overworked and had a lot on his plate when he came and looked at it, but he did come and had some suggestions, but we haven't been able to follow up since.
Okay, maybe we could. We will follow up. I know Mr. Brunson and I talked about needs for the courts in general and doing an assessment. We've heard from different parties about either needing reconfiguration or even replacement, desks and chairs, et cetera. So as we prepare for the budget, but even prior to then, we'll do some assessments to ensure space issues that we can address happen quicker.
Oh, that would be great. Sometimes we can come up with some creative solutions to things like this. And I also want to recognize your collaboration with our Justice Services Department for pretrial release, for our recovery court, our mental health court. That is a team approach, and it could not be successful without everyone working together, and those are really successful programs, so thank you. And now Save Babies is another one, so thank you. I wanted to ask you about involuntary commitments and what role you all play with that. That's something that has really risen to everyone's attention with looking at our behavioral health and crisis response system, and one of the things that we've realized is that people are not, the orders that have been written out for IBCs used to go to our recovery response center, our 24-hour crisis response center, where they really are equipped to take care of people for a longer length of time, and people are been going, instead being sent to the Duke Regional Hospital Behavioral Health Urgent Care, which they will not keep them for like more than like 24 hours. Are you aware of any conversations about trying to get the orders to now go back to Recovery Response Center the way they used to a few years ago? There seems to have been...
Right. No,
Yeah.
I'm not. Our role
Okay.
in the involuntary commitment process is to represent those persons who have been committed and are in custody and are entitled to a hearing. That's our role. So we represent them at the hospitals, Veterans Hospital, Duke,
Okay.
all of those places.
So you don't have any input in requesting they go to some place like Recovery Response Center?
No, ma'am.
No. Okay. Who would be the best source to have input into that issue, directing where they're actually being sent to?
The judges
Okay.
that's assigned to handle the involuntary commitments.
Okay. All right. Thank you so much.
Commissioner Britton?
Thank you. Thank you, Chair Alam. And thank you so much for all your service and all your hard work. The question I had was about the drug treatment court, because I'm a new commissioner, so I wanted just a little bit more background about, why it worked, how it was funded, why it was defunded, and how we can get it back. And I know Chair Alam said something about putting it in our budget, but I just wanted some more background information around it.
On the family drug treatment court or the current drug treatment court?
The one you said, family drug treatment court. Yes, that was the one that was defunded.
Yes.
Okay, yes, ma'am.
Yes, that court was used to where there was families or mother who had lost their child and they were dealing with issues of drug abuse or homelessness or things of that nature. They were given those resources. So the court worked in tandem with that person's case to make sure that they were getting the resources they need to become the type of parent they needed to be to get their child back. And if that involved the child as well needing resources, that child was included as well to make the family better and get them whole and happy.
And
I cannot tell you why it got defunded, because at that time I was busy doing felonies in Superior Court, but it got defunded.
It got defunded. Okay, so, and you said there are 24 public defenders, and
Yes.
it's not enough.
No.
Like, in order to be effective, how many do you think you would need?
I would say 30. That way I could have a more balanced caseload. I mean, the case is going to keep coming, but I think 30 will help us manage it better and be able to take care of people the way we desire to.
Gotcha. Thank you so much.
I want to go back to something that Commissioner Jacobs touched on, and I think Manager Hager kind of chimed in as well. When you talk about the things that you need, you're talking about digital space for storage of files, physical and so forth, as well as space. Do you have an idea of what you need? Let's start with the digital space, because that's probably the easiest to allocate. Are you all filling up your drives?
We are filling up our drives. IDS has been trying to come up with a different way of helping with the space in terms of how we get discovery by Axon, but all of us don't have the same system because it's so expensive for them. But we're filling up our drives. We've never had a physical space donated solely to public defenders' files. Right now, we're in a space where I think half of it is for district attorney storage and the other half is for us. And then we have some files in another room because we have to keep, just so you understand, we have to keep all juvenile files. We have to keep all abuse, neglect, and dependency files, and we have to keep all murder files for life.
For life, okay.
Yeah. So we can't ever get rid of those files. And then there are other files that we have to keep for 5 to 7 years before we can purge those. And we do that when we can. But that's still 5 to 7 years, and we're still taking care of cases and having to find places to put those files until we can purge.
Now, with our other jurisdictions, are there best practices on how they handle that? Like, is it a off-site storage facility that they have? Like, you know, when case files get so long, you can keep them securely somewhere. Are there other programs like that?
I have not heard of one.
Okay. Okay, thank you.
Commissioner Valente?
Thank you, Chair. Attorney Baxton.
Yes, sir.
Thank you for appearing here today, and thank you for your many years of service to Durham County in several capacities. Thank you for your comments regarding family reunification, which is dear to my heart. As a former social worker, I know the importance of keeping families together. And I hear, you know, a lot of frustration in the community about this issue. Some of it is caused by a lack of knowledge with respect to how the system works. Mm-hmm. And so on the one hand, as a member of the Board of Social Services, I understand clearly that the agency is charged with the protection of children, but adjudications occur in that courtroom. And I want to thank you and the people that you supervise in your office for making this a priority, because I know your office is doing that, to ensure that we're doing the very best that we can to ensure that in an appropriate situation that families are reunified. And so I associate myself with the comments that have already been made by my colleagues, and I'm hoping that you'll continue to work with the judiciary to ensure that we can speed up the docket so that more of Durham County's children can get an opportunity to return to their families of origin when appropriate. It's not in every instance that would be appropriate, but as many families that we can reunify as we can. So thank you again.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Chief Public Defender Don Baxton, for being here, for all of the work, and I look forward to having more conversations, especially around the Family Drug Treatment Court.
Absolutely. Thank you so much.
That now brings us to our Durham to Roxborough Rail Trail presentation. And I believe we have 60 minutes allocated for this presentation. I'll wait till Ellen comes up, but Ellen, do you think 40 minutes presentation, 20 for questions?
Yeah.
Okay. Great. I think we have a lot of new faces also, so please introduce yourselves as well.
Do you want to start, Ellen?
Yeah. All right, good morning, commissioners. So we're excited to be bringing the draft final plan summary presentation of the Durham to Roxborough Rail Trail to you today. As you know, this is a study of a 18-mile inactive rail corridor in Durham County, looking at the potential to convert it to a greenway trail. We have been working on this for about the past year with a consultant team and a multi-jurisdictional team of folks, many of whom are here today. So just to introduce everyone, I'm Ellen Beckman, the Durham County Transportation Director, Brooke Roper, Durham County Transportation Planner. And then we have the consultant team, Caroline Stahlschmidt and Holly Waterman from Destination by Design, and Sarah Johnson from Tool Design. We also have a couple of people in the back here. Andrew Meeker from the East Coast Greenway Alliance, David Miller from the Triangle West Transportation Planning Organization, And we also had two other organizations represented who aren't here today, but City of Durham Parks and Rec Department, as well as NCDOT. So it's a big project, and it required a big team. Just to summarize, Caroline's going to give a presentation, and I do want to emphasize that we're not really requesting action today. We're requesting feedback on this final plan summary to guide the final report. We intend to bring the final report back to you at a later date, asking for adoption. And there will also be a request for approval of funding for acquisition that we'll get to. So with that, I'll turn it over to Caroline.
All right, thank you, everyone. So as Ellen mentioned, my name is Caroline. Sarah and I will be co-presenting today, and we also have other members of the team here to answer questions if needed. And as Ellen mentioned, there were 5 organizations that led this project from the client side. Ellen mentioned them: Durham County, City of Durham, Triangle West, East Coast Greenway, and NCDOT. Today, we are going to summarize the year-long planning process in 30 minutes. And we'll talk about the discovery phase, and there were 2 phases of community engagement, so we'll talk about phase 1 and phase 2. We'll outline how we did the plan development, and then we'll talk about the recommendations. The project timeline, so our planning study timeline, was a year long, as Ellen mentioned. We started in October of 2024, and we'll complete it at the end of this month. Today, we are presenting to all of you. Later this week, we'll present to the City Council, and then, as Ellen mentioned, we're not actually asking for action today. She'll be back at a future date for that. And then I wanted to also talk about the overall timeline of this, just to ground in that. So this opportunity for this rail corridor and a potential rail trail has been identified since 1988 in many county and city plans that were adopted. This planning process, as I said, has been a full year. And the corridor acquisition, so the attempts to acquire this corridor from Norfolk Southern, have been going on since the early 2000s, and it has been in the Durham County CIP since 2006. This most recent attempt to acquire the corridor was started by the Conservation Fund about 2 years ago on behalf of North Carolina DOT, and the anticipated closing is at the end of this year. It's an incredible opportunity for someone who doesn't live here, I can say that, to be able to acquire a corridor of this length and potentially have a rail trail that would serve the community of this length is really amazing. And no eminent domain is required to make this happen. So what we're going to show you today, no eminent domain. I just want to state that. I'll state it a few times. The corridor is owned by Norfolk Southern and will be acquired. And then NCDOT will own the corridor as part of the Rail Corridor Preservation Project that will allow for that use as a trail, very similar to American Tobacco Trail. So you have a great representation of what this will look like south of the city. And then design and development will take many, many years. So this will certainly not be built in a year or tomorrow. It will likely occur in phases over 10 to 20 years. We'll talk a little bit about that phasing at the end. And that specific schedule for design and development is not yet determined. It will be determined by staff and funding and all the other things that go into that. The goals of this planning study, we really had sort of 6 pillars of goals. The first was assets. As I mentioned, no eminent domain used for this, so it was really important to the project management team and our teams to identify places in the right-of-way or publicly owned properties that could be used for potential trailheads and other amenities. Partnership was also obviously a key cornerstone of this, with 5 organizations partnering to lead this effort, and then partnering with organizations within the community, which we'll talk about as we move through this presentation. Connectivity, incredible opportunity to connect the city of Durham to Roxborough and all the communities in between. Unity and distinction or distinctive were two important pillars. So what we heard from the start was there are incredible historic and cultural resources in this corridor. We want to recognize that. We want to feature that. We want to make sure that that is part of this planning process. And then how do we create an identity that really unites two counties, all these small communities, all these different people? Lastly, what is the strategy for actually making this happen? So once the corridor is acquired, how do we design and develop it and bring it to life as an incredible community asset? All right, I'm gonna turn it to Sarah.
Good morning, thank you for having us. So as Caroline mentioned, we had 2 phases of engagement. The first phase of engagement took place from mid-January to the end of March of this year. And the photos that you see here, the graphics that you see, are kind of a smattering of the materials created for that engagement. So there is a fact sheet that lived on the website, as you can see. We had social media posts coordinating with different county and city staff to review, make sure that it was in Spanish, make sure it was going out into the proper channels. We had a community survey that was held online and available in person at our public workshops. There were focus groups as well as pop-up events. So the community survey, we had almost 3,000 responses, and that's not, answers, that's actual participants. So nearly 3,000 participants for this survey, which was pretty incredible. And it represented 88 zip codes, so obviously that's more than are in Durham County. But we had a lot of folks here that responded to it. And people gave us feedback during this first round, which was really trying to understand what is there special to know about your community and what do you want to see on the trail, and just kind of the discovery of what could this be without getting into recommendations yet. So we have a lot of different kind of demographic breakdowns and a lot of different information about what people wanted to see on these slides. I will recognize that they are very dense. One of the things to notice in the top left is that overwhelmingly there was strong community support. There are definitely folks that did not want the trail at all from the get-go and continued to have that opinion through the entirety of the planning process. So you can see that 15% strongly oppose the trail. When people were thinking about what they would like to do on the trail, a lot of folks were saying that they really wanted to be able to walk, bike, run, jog, but then, we even had a small contingent of folks that wanted to ride horses for equestrian use. Thinking about the kind of amenities or the destinations they wanted to get to, a lot of people recognized that this could be a connection to other trails, other greenways, as well as parks, downtowns, neighborhoods. They were very interested in restrooms along the trail, as well as trailheads, having places to rest, making sure that there was shade and that there was signage to give them the confidence of knowing where they were going, and so they had that directional signage. People said that they wanted to use this trail, and the majority of folks, so 44%, or the biggest share, they wanted to use it a few times a month, although we had a really large share that wanted to use it daily or even a few times a week. And again, you see that 18% that said they would never use it. That's tracks pretty closely with the number of people who strongly oppose it in general. So within the survey, there was also maps, a map where you could place comments on specific places to give kind of contextual feedback about what's happening here, be aware of this in this location. And so we received information about opportunities and concerns. So people wanted to connect, like I mentioned, to the neighborhoods, trails, recreational assets. They wanted to make sure that there was opportunity for having parking and pedestrian and bicycle kind of access to it. They really thought that this was a great opportunity for even fishing access. This passes through Penny's Bend, which is a very popular fishing destination. Solid opportunity for educating people about the history of this space and wildlife viewing as well. And then there were a lot of concerns. So people were very curious, what are you going to do at crossings? How are you going to make it feel safe with all of these road crossings that you have? What about crime? What about the fact that this runs alongside some hunting game lands? How are you going to handle that? What is patrolling going to look like? What is enforcement going to look like on the trail? Also concerns around the environmental impact, right? So especially after Tropical Storm Chantal, what does flooding look like? What does the impact to wetlands look like? What about gentrification? As well as concern around, will there be sufficient parking, or will that have an impact on the neighborhoods? So great insight from the community. This shows kind of the smattering of everything that happened in this first phase. So in addition to that nearly 3,000 respondents on the online survey, we had 3 public workshops, one in downtown Durham at the main library, and then one at the Edison Johnson Center which is essentially as close as we could get to kind of our Bragtown section of the trail, and then also in the North Regional Library. We had focus groups because we recognize that the people who respond to online surveys are not always the people who live right along the trail. And so we were very intentional about reaching out to specific groups to seek feedback from them. So we had focus groups with the North Durham community, and that included folks from the Bahama and Rougemont Raritan clubs, as well as the Stagville Descendants Council, and with the Bragtown Community Association. And then you can see the 12 different pop-up events that our staff team members went out and facilitated. So in total, that was over another 600 participants engaged. And I'll walk you through the plan development. So this, as Caroline mentioned, this is a long corridor, 18.2 miles in total, just to get you to the Durham County, Person County line. And then Person County has completed their own version of this plan for the remaining mileage to get you into Roxborough. So for the 18.2 miles, we looked at it in a lot of different ways. We did a desktop analysis, which involved looking at your GIS files, or kind of your map files, and overlaying as much information as we could as possible. We also did, we looked at imagery. So your aerial imagery, thank you for investing in the aerial imagery. It's very helpful for these types of projects. We also looked at Google Street View. We were comparing to other trail projects. And again, you've got the American Tobacco Trail, which is fantastic, but there's lots of other trail projects happening around the country, not just in urban areas, but also in highly rural areas as well. And then we really took a strong focus to where there might be opportunity for trailheads. As Caroline mentioned, there is no eminent domain as part of this project. And I will say that when we began looking at trailheads, we just looked at every single thing. So we looked at every parcel, if it was public, if it was private, maybe private not developed, just to have a stock, to look at it. And then after we went through the whole corridor, we came to the fantastic realization there were enough publicly held parcels along the trail that there was no need to even engage in conversation with private landowners, unless there may be some opportunity for kind of a commercial hub, right? Like maybe there is a commercial node already on the trail. And so there were some conversations around that, but none with just people who maybe had, an undeveloped lot or agricultural lot near the trail. So looking at overall the assets near the trail, you can see there's 21 public parks, 6 nature preserves, 12 bike pedestrian trail connections. There's 8 lakes or rivers, and then it passes through 26 neighborhoods. It's within a mile of 12 public schools. You have 11 historical sites, 2 recreation centers, 4 business districts, 4 art centers. So even though it is passing through what may be perceived as a bit more less dense and more rural, there's actually, as we mentioned, a lot of cultural and community assets along this rail corridor. We also did a lot of field work, so going out in person multiple times over the past year to look at all of the different railroad, the crossings, the roadway crossings, as well as looking at bridges. So there's 3 bridges for this. So looking at those trestles and those structures. We did meet with property owners who, there are a couple of different kind of commercial businesses that do back right up to the rail corridor. So having conversations with those business owners to understand any kind of interest in trail-oriented development. And we took a lot of imagery ourselves so that we could go back and reference it and use it for our renderings. So what we came out of in terms of big picture recommendations, so I'm going to hit just the corridor wide ones, as Caroline will jump into your more kind of project-specific implementation pieces. We came to a 12 to 14-foot asphalt trail. So this is similar to what you see on the American Tobacco Trail, or if you've been down to the Swamp Rabbit Trail outside of Greenville, South Carolina, but it's a bit wider because we recognize that people, they like to be social when they walk on trails. You don't walk single file, right? You want to walk side by side with somebody or bike side by side with somebody, and you also still need to be able to pass. So what this does by having at least this size, the 12 to 14 feet, really it creates effectively 3 lanes. So you can have 2 people walk side by side or bike side by side with a third person passing them. And then we always recommend the shoulder to have crushed stone, and that really helps with kind of the longevity of the asphalt path itself. And then it provides additional passing space or pull-off space with the dog. Runners often like to run on a softer surface as well. Important for you all to note is, remember I said that we had that kind of smaller contingency of folks interested in equestrian use, is about 180 folks that mentioned that on the survey. We continued to hear about that over time. And so this configuration that I'm showing you, we have identified as a potential alternative for North Durham County, and that would need to be considered in the future. There's a few things that would need to fall in place to really dedicate more time and analysis for this type of configuration, but we did feel like it was important to at least acknowledge it and to say that this is an option in the future should there be partnership with equestrian groups to be able to move it forward. And so this would have a slightly smaller asphalt trail, but again, you're further north, a little bit more rural, and you're still getting that effective width for comfortable passing. And it has the equestrian trail separated by vegetation, and you can see an example of this in Vienna, Virginia on the W&O&D trail. And then again, still some shoulders, and here we are showing that fencing would be appropriate because of the equestrian use. So roadway crossings, I mentioned that this was something that came up time and again. Everybody was very concerned. Okay, it's gonna feel comfortable, I'm on the trail, I'm in the woods, it's serene, and then all of a sudden I have to cross, East Club Boulevard, or all of a sudden I have to cross Old Oxford Road or Stagwell Road. So after speaking with the City of Durham Department of Transportation as well as NCDOT, we really heard a request from them to have flexibility in the recommendations that we provided around roadway crossings. So what that resulted in was essentially 2 things. We came up with, we came up with 2 types of crossings. So unsignalized, which you see kind of in the middle of the screen, versus signalized, which you see on the right side, as well as addressing the crossing at the exact junction, the place where the trail crosses the road, is not enough. We'd like to have a toolkit of add-ons. So you could think about what can you do way in advance on the street as people are approaching the trail itself. So for example, those add-ons could be things like rumble strips. You might be familiar with them, the white lines that kind of come across your travel lane as you get off the highway, and it goes doot, 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 and it really alerts you to the fact, hey, something's about to happen, you need to pay attention. Or things like speed cushions, and it really just depends on the speed of the road, which types of treatments are appropriate. So out of our 21 crossings, 2 of them are grade separated. That's I-85 and Camden Avenue. And then we are recommending, we are for sure recommending signalization at East Club Boulevard and Dearborn Drive within the City of Durham. As you move into the county, there are roadways that are pretty low volume in terms of the number of vehicles as well as lower speed. I will say that some of them are higher speed, but the volumes are so low that it doesn't make sense really to have this signal. And I'll give you an example of that. So number 21, almost up at the Person County line, that's Harris Mill Road. That's a no outlet road. It's a dead end road. It mostly services farms. So that is a place where we really feel like a yield sign and a regular crosswalk makes the most sense. But I will say for a lot of your crossings in North Durham County, those have been identified as A or B, and kind of giving the engineers in the future a bit of flexibility to make that decision. And I want to make sure that I do point out that the North Durham Parkway, that would be coming in just north of Hamlin Road. And based on early conversations with the DOT, it sounds like there could be potential for that to be grade separated, because again, that would be making like a 4-lane road crossing, so the pretty much the widest road crossing other than the I-85 underpass. So being ahead of the game on that in terms of design would be very helpful for the safety of trail users. All right.
Okay. So we had a second round of community engagement that began on May 1st and ran through September 24th. And at this point, the intention was to bring some of these conceptual designs back to the community and back to these focus groups for input. Again, we had the website, project website, still having information posted there. We had a second online survey. We had another series of public workshops, focus groups, project coordination meetings. We had a postcard mailer that went to all residents that had property adjacent to the trail, and the staff led a number of pop-up events again. And the images that you see on the screen are some of the conceptual designs that we shared at many of these public meetings and online. For the second survey, we had less response, which is to be expected. There's always a lot of excitement at the start of a project in both directions. But the second survey required a little bit more engagement from the survey taker because they were reviewing these conceptual designs and providing input. So not quite as easy as just clicking through and choosing kind of multiple choice. So those who engaged, we had 453. We offered this survey in both English and Spanish. It was only online because of the nature of the survey with the conceptual designs, and the majority of people took the survey in English. You can see the demographics here. And in terms of this survey response, most of the questions were open-ended because we were asking people to provide comment and reflection on the conceptual designs that had been outlined. So we've shared some of the quotes and comments here, trying to give a representation of both positive, negative, neutral in terms of how people responded. And then we analyzed all of those responses to all of the questions to get a sense of, was this person in favor of the trail, or is this person in favor of the trail, not in favor of the trail, neutral, or they just didn't provide comments, they just clicked through and looked at the designs. Interestingly enough, we had the exact same percentage, 71% in favor of the trail, and in the first survey it was 81%. So we were really happy to see that stayed consistent throughout the planning process. There we go. And as I mentioned, this second phase had more events and opportunities to engage with the public. So we had 3 public workshops, again, essentially the same geographic area, downtown, in the Bragtown area, and then North Durham County. Over 90 people attended those workshops. We had 4 focus groups. As Sarah mentioned, those were small groups that had specific people invited to provide comment on specific areas of interest or concern. In this phase, we had project coordination meetings with specific organizations. So this wasn't necessarily the public, but instead organizations, either county or nonprofits that were representing specific groups, such as U.S. Army Corps of Engineers. We had a transportation project coordination group. We met with the sheriff, and we spoke to those who are informed about land use and housing. The staff also conducted a series of general information sessions, not systems. 5 of those were intended to do additional reach out and answer questions and address concerns or misconceptions about the trail with specific groups where that was happening, North Durham County and other areas like that. And then lastly, the staff, again, did a series of pop-up events. This is the meet people where they are, just setting up at farmers markets and places like that to engage people and tell them about the trail. So all said, in this second phase, just shy of 400 people engaged outside of the survey. We also did a second round of focus groups, as I said. You can see some of what came up in those focus groups, again, staying pretty consistent throughout the planning process. So desire some specific things around trailheads, desire for more parking at Penny's Bend, excitement about the trailheads, and we heard a lot about limiting the impact, the environmental impact in the area throughout, because there's some really special places along the way, and then concerns about crime and gentrification, again, similar to what we heard in the early survey. Excitement about connecting to different communities and different assets. We'll talk about how we'll do that, and then really emphasizing that historical and cultural interpretation, and just a desire to do this thing, right? To get this trail built. We heard that a lot, so especially in the southern part of the corridor. Thinking about moving forward with this and bringing this to life, we, through the planning process, had 5 planning sections, but then as we got to the point of how do we bring this to life, we identified 6 segments to break this 18.2 mile corridor into, because the reality is this cannot be built in one shot probably or overnight. So breaking it into segments makes it more possible to request and receive funding, and just a more manageable process for building the trail. It will be very important to remain flexible and opportunistic. We never know where funding might come from. Examples like the funding that came from the pandemic and different times. We just never know where funding will come from. So having the plan, being ready to go and apply for funding is critically important, and with partnerships that might come up. As I mentioned, we have 6 trail segments. I won't read them here because I am going to go into those in just a moment. And I want to say that everything that you see from here on out is preliminary conceptual designs. This would all be subject to engineering and survey data and regulatory review and collaborating with adjacent property owners. The first segment is Avondale Road to Hamlin Road. So this is coming out of downtown, primarily in the city. And so this segment is 3.47 miles. There's a tremendous amount in this segment in terms of potential trailheads and connections. There is one structure at Ellerby Creek, so there's an existing bridge that is in pretty bad shape, will probably require a partial or full rebuild. There are 4 at-grade road crossings. Sarah mentioned East Club Boulevard as well as Dearborn would likely both need to be a signalized intersection. You likely know those intersections. They're high volume and kind of tricky crossings. And then there are 2 underpasses, I-85 and Camden Avenue. I'll show a photo rendering of one of those. And then many assets in the community in this region. So obviously downtown Durham, connecting to the Tobacco Trail, the future Durham Rail Trail, as well as we move towards Bragtown, multiple schools and parks and the library. In this section, there are also a number of Go Durham bus routes, so providing the opportunity for people to take public transportation to the trail. That was something that we heard a lot from the city that they wanted to make sure that we looked at. This portion of the trail and the next few will also be a shared route with the East Coast Greenway, which opens up some potential for funding. I'm going to show a few conceptual designs. So this is just casting a vision of what this could look like. This parcel is at Camden Avenue, and it's currently owned by DOT, so a publicly owned parcel. The project management team asked us to do 2 conceptual designs here. This one maximizes parking, and this one has less priority on parking and adds some other amenities and features. Again, these are conceptual just to be able to paint the picture of this is what it could look like to have the trail coming through here and having a trailhead. This is the I-85 underpass as it is in its current state. And this is what it could look like when the trail is passing under it. So the underpasses always provide an opportunity for art. Obviously, we want to make sure there's lighting and it feels like a safe environment for people who are traveling on the trail here. And then I'll show you a few different maps where we can look at how the trail will interface with other aspects of the community. So here we have an opportunity along Ellerby Creek to create a connector trail that would take advantage of a city-owned parcel, we call it the wetland parcel up there, and connect over to Beaver Marsh Nature Preserve. So it was really important to look at where schools, other parks, other trails were, and how could the rail trail connect to those other community assets. This is the second trailhead in this segment. This is at East Club Boulevard. This is a city-owned property. A really nice opportunity to have a larger trailhead here to service this southern terminus or the southern part of the trail. So potential for 60 to 7 parking spots here. Again, this is all just conceptual, and designs could change in the future. This is the current road crossing at East Club Boulevard. The little arrow that's the rail corridor there that you can see. And then this is what that crossing could look like. So this is a photo rendering of what that crossing could potentially look like. This is one that does have high traffic volume, would likely need to be signalized to ensure that it's a safe crossing. In the Bragtown area, this is not a trailhead, but we wanted to show how the trail would interface with Dearborn Road, and Dearborn is another area that's a slightly higher traffic road. So the little pink sort of circle that you see there would be a roundabout on the trail, or could be a roundabout on the trail that would signal to the pedestrians and cyclists that something is coming up, you should slow down. And it's also an opportunity to bring art and history and culture into the trail, and potentially exhibits and educational exhibits. And this type of design could happen anywhere on the trail. We're just showing it here in Bragtown to give a sense of how it could interface with the trail and the road crossing. Really likes Bragtown. There we go. The second segment is Hamlin Road to Penny's Bend. This is just under 2 miles, 1.75. There is one structure here. Many of you probably know it. It is kind of the iconic image of this trail. It's the bridge at the Eno River, which is in pretty good shape. People are walking across it probably right now. So that one probably can stay mostly in its form. There are 2 road crossings in this section, and then key connections here. This is a significant recreation hub with Penny's Bend, the Mountains to Sea Trail. There's an elementary school in the area, and this would still be shared use for East Coast Greenway. I'm sure many of you are familiar with the current Old Oxford Road Bridge and Penny's Bend area. This is another opportunity for a trailhead that would be a shared recreation hub for Penny's Bend, the Mountains to Sea Trail, and the rail trail. We looked at 2 concepts here as well. This is sort of the near-term concept, where we would look at parking off of Old Oxford Road, and the 06 there on the left, that's the current gravel lot at Penny's Bend, so that would remain. The second option is ambitious and a long-term vision to really make this area safer for all the pedestrians and cyclists who use this area. This would put a roundabout in at Old Oxford Road and move the parking on Snow Hill Road, make that larger, and then potentially have a trail crossing under the vehicular bridge here or over, depending. So this is the potentially long-range vision that I know some members of the county are excited about. This third segment is Penny's Bend to Rhododendron, so just under 4 miles. 1 bridge in this section. This is our last bridge at the Little River. There's 3 road crossings, and then lots of connections here, and I'm just going to jump right to this connectivity map. So there's Lucas Middle School, Little River Elementary, and the Durham Technical Community College here, as well as Catawba Trail Farm. We spent time at the property at Catawba Trail Farm. They are excited about the trail and having the trail potentially cross their a connector trail across their property to make these connections to the schools. It would require crossing the Little River there, but could provide a really nice opportunity for environmental exhibits and sort of educational opportunities, especially with the schools nearby. This is Rhododendron Road in this section. This is what it currently looks like. This is a photo rendering of what it could look like. So this is a lower volume crossing, non-signalized. You can see how the trail users would interface with the road crossing there. The fourth segment is Rhododendron to Ball Road. There's 8 at-grade road crossings here. Another very important section with Stagville Historic Site and Horton Grove, Lake Mickey, Mangum Elementary, and again, this is where the East Coast Greenway would diverge and continue its path across the state. I'll show 2 connections here in this section. So this is at Orange Factory Road, potentially using sidewalk there or an alternative trail to connect over to Horton Grove, which would eventually connect to Stagville. That's in their plans to connect to Stagville. This is Bahama Road in this section. So again, just showing what this currently looks like, what this crossing could look like. And then the final connection that I want to show is to Lake Mickey and Mangum Elementary. So this would be using Ball Road and sidewalks there to potentially provide a connection to the elementary school and over to Lake Mickey Recreation Area. Fifth segment is Ball Road to Red Mountain Road. We come into Rougemont with this section, 3 at-grade crossings and the community of Rougemont and the historic train depot. This is an area where fortunately the rail right-of-way is wider, so it gives us an opportunity to have a trail head here in the railroad right-of-way there at Red Mountain Road. And you can see 6 there on the bottom. We have another trail roundabout as a possibility before that road crossing. And then the final, our shorty section, bringing us into Person County, so Red Mountain Road to Person County, just over 1 mile, and just 1 road crossing here, so probably a fairly short and attainable section that would connect us to Person County and their remaining portion into the city of Roxborough. So the takeaways that I just want to finish with before I turn it back to Ellen, as we have talked about, the corridor is currently owned by Norfolk Southern, fee simple. There will be no eminent domain as part of this acquisition. That purchase is being facilitated by the Conservation Fund, and NCDOT anticipates that by the end of 2025. To build this trail, there will be a need and an opportunity to leverage federal and state funding. Most of those federal transportation funds typically are provided at 80% with a 20% non-federal match. And in terms of state funding, there's, at least at the moment, lots of opportunity for funding through state parks. This trail is part of the Great Trail State Plan. It has portions of the Mountain to Sea Trail, which is a state trail, as well as East Coast Greenway. So opportunity for funding there. The very rough cost estimate for building the trail would be $46 to $57 million. That includes the facilities and the connections that we talked about. A full cost estimate will be in the final report. And then the last thing that I do want to mention is that establishing the roles of Durham County and City of Durham in terms of trail development and ongoing maintenance will be a very important next step. And then establishing the role within Durham County will be an important next step, which departments are holding which aspects. Turn it to Ellen.
All right, thank you, Caroline. That's a lot of information.
We're on the time, Ellen. I know.
I just have one slide.
Perfect.
Just one slide. This is all I have. So I just wanted to queue up what is happening next. Again, no action today. We want your feedback on this plan, but pretty soon we will be bringing forward a request for approval of funding for our portion of the acquisition. And that will involve a number of things. We'll have to approve some Durham County funding. We need to enter into a funding agreement with NCDOT. They are purchasing the project, the corridor, and we are contributing to them. And then we have 2 state parks grants that have been approved for this corridor acquisition. One direct to Durham County was awarded over the summer for $500,000, and one to the East Coast Greenway Alliance. They sought out funding and got a $1 million grant that they were going to share proportionately between Person County, Durham County, and the city of Durham. So with all of that, Durham County's net cost would be projected to be around $223,000, or 1.7% of the corridor acquisition cost. So I want to emphasize that this has been a partnership to get this funding, right? We have sought out all the opportunities we could over the last couple of years. And it required a lot of coordination with outside groups, NCDOT, the East Coast Greenway Alliance, the other 2 local government partners. So Durham County, had been planning on this acquisition in its CIP for many years. I think there's about $2.5 million set aside, and fortunately, we only need to use 223 of that for acquisition. So that's very soon and needs to happen pretty quickly for NCDOT's acquisition by the end of this year. And then another step will be the formal adoption of the plan. So again, not asking for feedback today, or not asking for action today, asking for feedback. And as Caroline said, this is a long-term project. Like, this is a big one, right? This longest trail project I've ever worked on. We're not funding it all at one time. It's going to take place over probably decades, many phases. So funding for design and construction, that would all occur through the local government budget processes, and we're not asking for that today either. So that's the last slide. I just wanted to cue that up, and we can answer any questions that you have.
Thank you so much. I'll start on this end with Commissioner Britton.
Thank you, Chair Alam. And first and foremost,
Actually, sorry, Commissioner Britton. I forgot. Vice Chair Dr. Lee has to step out, so if you want to go first, sorry, and then we'll go to. Yes.
Yeah, I don't have much. I just want to just show appreciation for the detail that you all have in here. I really love the fact that you kept saying there's no eminent domain, needed here. That's very, very good. I'm really excited about this. I think I'll probably have to send some questions here about the phasing of it and the crosses and things. A lot of that is right near where I live, and I just want to learn a little bit more about that as far as especially with the schools and things, how do we try to connect, Sandy Ridge is right there, very close to one of the places, as you said, and I would love to see how we can integrate that more, to allow the kids to get over there, a little more safely. I think Mangum was really fairly close there, and I saw Lucas up there. So I really love the fact that it's actually kind of winding up near where our schools are. And I do have some questions around, and I can't really get into it right now because I have to leave and just step out just for a moment. I'm not leaving. I just have to go to do something really quickly. But about the funding, and because there were pieces that looked longer, but they were cheaper, where there are smaller pieces that looked more expensive, right? And I was really curious about how that formula happens. I know it's all preliminary. I get it. It's not a final, but I'm really curious about how that's calculated, and the traffic circle on Old Oxford. That'd be really that's really ambitious, especially for that intersection with Snow Hill, because there's a lot going on right there. But I will be in touch. I'll reach out to you, Ellen, and see if you can transmit it to everyone there. But I do have some questions about how to fund it, how the budget for the different sections are calculated, because it was such a variation, and there was no correlation between the size of the plan versus the budget. I'd be really interested in learning about that. But
yeah, and I know you have to go. I'll just say one thing. There will be a very detailed preliminary budget in the final plan with all those documentation. And I think part of what you're seeing is if there's a trailhead or the connections in a segment, that would impact the cost.
Or a bridge.
Or a bridge.
Yeah.
Right.
And then the number of crossings as well. So you do have some long stretches without trailheads, and without necessarily, we might not even have any bridge or creek crossing in it. So those things are kind of bigger ticket items.
And just really quickly, the tracks, do they get pulled up or are they paved over? Pulled up. Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, very good. Thank you all very much. This was excellent. This was an excellent presentation, so I really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Britton?
Yeah, I don't have any questions. I just want to say to Ellen and Brooke, you all have done a fantastic job with this, especially since I'm the liaison to Open Space and Trails, and we were on a call on Thursday, and just listening to how you handled some of the questions and the big concern around eminent domain, because that came up, and I'm glad that, just like my colleague, Vice Chair Lee said, you've said it over and over, there will not be any eminent domain, so we can believe that confidently. So I just want to say thank you for all of your hard work on this, especially the hard work around getting as much public comment as possible to make sure the community was involved and gave their input. That was really, really important, and thank you to you all as well. This is really, really great, so I just wanted to give you your kudos. So.
Commissioner Jacobs?
Thank you. yeah, great presentation, great work. All the engagement was amazing, and going to other events as well. Really fantastic. I will say that this will be one of the most important things that I will have done as a county commissioner. This is an investment in the future of Durham. It really is. And you know, I'm in my 4th term now, and I know how long it takes to get things done. And what's really critical right now is protecting this corridor, and the opportunity for this corridor to be publicly owned is critical. It may take us 20 years to build it, but the protection will be there for the residents and the future of Durham residents. So I just can't emphasize the value of that. And, you know, people who have been used to maybe living it with it, and I think, again, the point that this is not eminent domain. This is land that is owned by the railroad. And for residents who are concerned about that to understand, it's so much better for this to be publicly owned and protected than if a private developer came in and gained control of this corridor. So, you know, that's the other option. So we either protect it or it is up for grabs. And so I think people really need to understand that. And the fact that there's much work to be done, as you mentioned, but this is just the first step, and we will work with residents to try to address their concerns. And I appreciate looking at the plan and seeing all the ways that the plan is the first step at addressing the things that we've heard from the community about the width and, you know, what people want the different trailheads to be like, and where people want to connect to. Like, you have listened to the community already is reflected here. And it's amazing that the trailheads are also going to be on publicly owned land. And that NCDOT is going to be the entity who owns this corridor, the partnership. And thank you also for being here, the East Coast Greenway, all of the Conservation Fund, everyone. The fact that we are only putting in 1.7%, Keith, you've got to like this. We're only spending $220,000 for $13 million plus investment is unbelievable. It's amazing. And we already have the money set aside. So this is just a real game changer for our community. And just so thank you. Timeline, Ellen, I know you said this is very time sensitive, just so we're aware. When do you need this to come back to our board, because it's such a tight timeline?
So we're working with NCDOT's acquisition schedule that's mid-November. So we have a draft funding agreement that needs to be reviewed before it comes forward here for adoption. And then we are also working with the State Parks Department on those 2 grants. And we need to get confirmation of how we can get those funds secured and under a grant agreement as well.
So a lot of moving parts, a lot of logistics, and
I hope, yeah, by the end of this month.
Okay. All right. Well, we'll do our part. And I think it's also important to understand that not only do we need to act on the acquisition, but adopting the plan is also our first step to, in the future, applying for other funding to actually create the trail itself. So this is also really critical. The asset inventory and analysis is amazing. It's above and beyond anything we see with the Beltline or the ATT. I was wondering, when you all do is there a way to that asset map, and I don't know if you want to go back to the slide, because everything is just all in the same color. It's way back in. somewhere in the middle, but
You have lost control.
anyway, the asset map, it had like 40-something things on it, but is there a way to color code it so that there are different colors for like education, cultural, economic development, or workforce related assets? Because I think it's important to reflect the diversity. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So the written plan
Yeah.
will be much, much, much more detailed. If you think this is detailed, you're gonna
Okay,
love the
so
written
it will
plan.
reflect
Yes.
that.
Yeah,
Okay.
we'll have we have write-ups for all of these different areas. So schools, public greenways, the topics, with maps to go along with that and support it, and then much more detail about each planning section and what the opportunities were there, what the assets were. So I think you will be, you will love to read this plan.
Okay.
Yeah.
Because I was like even on the cross sections, like when you were showing, for instance, the connection to like the Beaver,
Beaver Marsh.
Right, Beaver Marsh, what jumped out at me is, well, there's also a connection to a commercial shopping area, right? And so thinking about the trail is going to connect people to so many different things. And I want to make sure that we're also reflecting that. And even when we get up into Rougemont, the economic development potential for some of the businesses up there, I just think it's really important. This trail is much more than just recreation. It really is. So, yeah. All right. Thank you so much.
Thank you all so much. And yeah, I'm appreciative of all the ways that y'all have done community engagement, because I know from the emails and conversations we've had, I'm sure they're not always the easiest conversations, but y'all have continued to stay engaged and answer folks' concerns and really help them understand how this is going to be a resource. I'm also excited that, it's going to come in phases. That gives me time to build up my endurance to be able to utilize the trail. And also, like, as we get closer to the time when we open the trail, just thinking about how Durham just announced the Garmin is having their new race and run here. I feel like this would be an amazing space that we could have some sort of like race or run or bike race on this trail to like announce for the ribbon cutting type ceremony, and like to just get people out there. I feel like it would be a really great way to splash.
If it's connected all the way to Roxborough, you're going to get pretty much a marathon distance from Durham to Roxborough.
That would be, yeah.
And I just wanted to say we had the Movable City this Sunday, and all the people who were riding their bikes and roller skating, and I think our community is just ready for something like this. So I just wanted to add that. Yeah.
Yes, I think definitely like as we get closer to the end, I would love for us to explore and even talk to the Sports Authority, because I feel like they have a lot of really great relationships with like Nike, Garmin, these international race organizations. I don't know what they're called, coalitions, to do that. It's good.
I just wanted to thank Ellen and Brooke for all of your efforts. I know it's a part of what you do, but you have definitely gone beyond what's required often to make sure that our residents are clear about this project, and also to the consultants who have helped us throughout the process. The engagement component was very involved, but that's what's required, and that's why we're at this place in the process. So again, thank you.
Thank you all so much.
Okay, thank you. Be back soon.
Okay, we have one last item, and I'm thinking if folks are okay with it, do you guys want to knock out this item? Then we have, okay. So I'll pass it on to Keith for our budget update and framework for 26.
Manager Hager, do you want to start with the first couple of slides and have to?
So Keith, before you get started, do you think on a scale of 1 to 10, how doom and gloom are we going to be?
I will play the bad cop to Manager Hager's good cop. It is, we'll let the presentation try to speak for itself, but you feel free to ask some questions after that.
Yes. And so we have 60 minutes, so 40 minutes for presentation and then 20 for questions. Yeah. Keep us going.
All right. Good morning, Board. We look forward to sharing some updates about our current state. Keith will lead majority of the conversation, and this dialogue is somewhat of an ongoing conversation since the beginning of the fiscal year and before. We've come to the board each work session sharing updates about the changing landscape, both in the federal and state situation. There are both policy shifts, funding shifts, many changes that have caused the country to revisit how they do their business. And oftentimes, we may not have enough time to get our CLECs together to work through it. But the framework, and Keith will talk further, but the framework will give the broad overview of the budget with where we are last year and the current year, how we're manage things, and the framework for planning for next year. And so I probably said a little bit more, and I know I want to pick up a couple of the slides, but Keith, is there anything else you'd like to talk about with the overall
No, I just
discussion?
I'd like the commissioners to understand from a budget office standpoint, this is a unique time of the year because we're looking at the end of 24-25, those numbers wrapping up, how we did for the end of 24-25 that stopped June 30th a couple of months ago has an effect on the 26-27 budget. But we're also at the same time just beginning 25-26, the year we're in right now. We're 3+ months into that, but we have folks sitting around us that will convey some of the chaos, or we'll call it chaos. A lot of change is happening at the federal and state level that will affect this year's budget, the current year we're in, which will also affect 26-27. So commissioners, I need y'all to think the end of 24-25 affects how we might think about 26-27 because of our how we end up with fund balance. How 25-26 changes will affect 26-27, and we're trying to incorporate some of those crystal ball sites, at least in the budget office, how that may affect 26-27 to give you an early idea of what 26-27 may look like and the headwinds involved in that. That's just generally the discussion we're going to have with a brief statement about the CIP at the end. Is that okay? I would like for y'all to get used to thinking how the budget office thinks. So there's 3 years we're working with right now. As we move forward, 24-25 actuals. Our property tax collection, yay, bright light, thanks to the tax administrator and their crew in the tax department, is doing very well. We're meeting our collection amounts, our budgeted collection amounts. We're not blowing past it. In the past, we used to well over collect in that revenue source because we tended to under budget, but we've tried to budget more closely to actual collections thanks to David's consistent discussions with Kiara in tax administration. However, we have seen our sales tax collection drop significantly from budget. And what do I mean by that? That's a loss of $11 million that we did not collect, that I had budgeted at the beginning of the fiscal year that just simply did not come to pass. And I'll show you a little later how that happened, some of the slides that are concerning. That is concerning not only for 24-25, but also for the current year and next year, because if we're not collecting what I thought we were going to collect in 24-25 in a low unemployment, very low unemployment state, and a generally decent economy, what does that mean moving forward with some of the things we're seeing at the state and federal level and potential economic changes we may experience in the future? We have had to increase our reliance on fund balance in the past as a revenue source. We haven't been able to do that in 25-26, largely because we're under collecting in some of our key revenues. We have lowered our expenditures, but that use of a revenue source is getting tighter and tighter. Not only did we reduce fund balance as a revenue source in 25-26, we may have to reduce it again in 26-27 just to stay fiscally responsible in the ways that we need to be. That's a discussion for another time that Claudia will have with Crystal Lee Wright, our CFO, up here sooner rather than later. Overall, our revenue collection for 24 was about 91% of our budget. Our expenditure expenditures for 24-25 were also around 91% of budget. So we tried to control our expenditures related to our slowing revenues by doing a number of things. We had operating cost freezes, we had mid-year vacant position freezes. I know that frustrated some departments, but it is what we had to do. On top of that, we continue to see increased inflationary costs for certain goods, such as gas and utilities. They're pacing higher than previous years. Inflation's hit a lot of different things. All that being said, 24-25, how it ended up, was decent, but it wasn't great in the sense that we weren't able to refill our fund balance as much as we may have wanted to, and we're going to have to face that fact in 26-27. Moving on to the current year, what year we're in right now. We have massive federal and state policy shifts. We have a few revenue and expenditure highlights, but only reason we have a few revenue and expenditure highlights, we've just started the fiscal year. We're only 3 months in. We've barely collected any property tax, and we've only collected 1 out of 12 months of sales tax, which was pretty good, but it doesn't begin to show the trend of what the year will be. Having said that, there are some key things we want to talk about that want to note that's happened in 25-26 and how we're managing the budget during this current year. Federal government shutdown will likely result in some suspended services. Federal and state policy changes pose a risk to revenue streams and expenditure requirements. You've experienced this already with discussions about the longstanding diet nutrition program. Potential revenue losses may happen in SNAP, and the local funds were used to offset some of those federal funding losses in the DINE program this year. Again, that's an expenditure pressure that may need to be added to next year as well, and we don't know where SNAP will end up, although I have 2 experts on either side of me who can help with that. To proactively deal with some of these impacts, the preliminary base budget assessment started in July with some work that John Kiefer's office did with ours and management team. We are assessing and evaluating funding allocations by category. That means by like federal and state funding, our revenue sources, and whether it's mandated or not state mandated, those types of things. And this work continues to build upon contract review initiatives we did during the 24-25 fiscal year. That's the same information. There is some information, if you are so inclined. NACO did a great summary of some of the federal and state changes at this link in your document. Please read that document, and it gives you an update of how the federal things may flow down to the counties. I'm going to let Rod talk about some of the problems or issues that have happened with public health during the current fiscal year.
Good morning again. Rod Jenkins, Director of Public Health. Be real brief. Keith touched on the DINE program reduction. We're grateful for the county for a local appropriation to allow us to maintain staff through the end of this fiscal year. We did receive notification that Medicaid cuts were going to affect in October 1st. We immediately contacted Keith and his team, let them know that our proposed decrease as of right now is about $75,228. That's pretty modest, but any cut to Medicaid means that we can't provide for our community. We did also receive notification from the North Carolina Department of Public Health that there was a 6% reduction in Title X funding. And as a result, there was a need to do a stop work order for Title X family planning funds in order for the state to assess and to really reassess, I should say, how to really spread those funding cuts throughout the state. Right now, Durham County exposure is right at about 87,553. As you all well know, Title X allows us to do family planning within the Department of Public Health. It's a very important function of what we do. And of course, we do have a strong relation with Lincoln Community Health Center. Every year, annually, I assure the provision of WIC services to Lincoln. And as of right now, that is the main thing that is driving health departments crazy right now during this government shutdown. A lot of counties are deliberating what to do with their WIC staff, if they have local appropriations that can help kind of float. It's important to remember, and I know I'm preaching to the crowd, but the last shutdown that we had lasted about 35 days, and that was in 2018, 2019. So again, I plan to have a conversation with CEO Claretta Foy around 3 o'clock today, just to really talk through things and just make sure that they're on the square. But that's all I have for public health.
Thank you, Rod. We're going to move to DSS now, and Maggie, if you want. Yep.
Hi, thank you. Good morning. I'm Maggie Clapp, the Director of Durham DSS. Currently, we do not have any word from the state on what's going to be impacted. They continue to work with the federal government to get that. There's going to be some programs which are exempt from a shutdown, but at this time, we don't know. The state last updated us on Friday with an update on Medicaid, which I think we have on the next slide. There's also a link here to a contingency staffing plan by HHS, if that's helpful. But again, at this time, the state has not told us which programs will be exempt and what that will mean for us in the counties. What we do know is that they have a certain amount of funds that they've already received. How far that stretches is we're being told through October. And then they're going to have to reassess at the end of October. There's some things locally that we may have to assess for. We've been hearing from some providers that they're not going to be getting reimbursed. So that looks like Meals on Wheels and SA in-home services. We will have to look at how far county funds that we currently have in the budget can go. Again, it's an ongoing situation. We did hear, as I said on Friday, that North Carolina Medicaid said that they do have enough funds to get us through the first quarter of the federal year. So again, that's federal year starts October 1. So it'd be October, November, and December. So that they do have enough funds to get us through that. Again, other than that, we're going to have to wait and see what the state hears from the federal government. What I'm hearing is that they're not getting a lot of communication. Because we've been reaching out to the state, and the state usually, according to my team and others, has been more proactive with communication in the past. They are not this time because they just don't have the communication at the federal level. As Keith said, it seems very chaotic.
Thank you, Maggie. And chaos is not good for, chaotic is not good for developing future year budgets. It's a very uncomfortable place that management and our office finds ourselves, and will continue to find ourselves as we develop the 26-27 budget. Some of the key items I want to note around the 25-26 budget, again, that's the current year win. No major revenues collected yet. We haven't begun to collect property tax. That will start in earnest in November and December and January. That's when the bills are sent out and you have to pay by December-ish time frame. So that money won't come in until the mid-year. We'll let you know when that comes. We put out a quarterly report, so our second quarter report will note that. We had to budget in 25-26. We used lower amount of fund balance as a revenue source, and that possibly will continue to be even lower again in 26-27, just to strengthen our fiscal stability. That's just the lower revenue available for next year. Economic indicators suggest downward pressure on revenues. Obviously, we're losing ARPA funds, but you're not going to lose the need that those ARPA funds were supporting. ARPA funds supported pre-K a little bit in the current year budget. It also supported a whole host of nonprofits that will be looking for continued funding in some form or fashion. Sales tax stagnation, I've talked about, and I'm going to show you in a couple of slides, so I'll hold off on that until we get to it. State hold harmless volatility. State hold harmless funds are funds the county get because of the loss of Article 44 sales tax way back 10, 15 years ago, and the state taking over Medicaid costs that the county used to have to support. As Article 44 sales tax grew for the county, that was taken away from Durham County and all counties and get for the state, grew higher than the Medicaid cost for Durham County, we got a rebate back. That number grew significantly over the last 5 years to become a double-digit million-dollar revenue source for us. We currently have $10 million budgeted in revenue coming to us from this state hold harmless based off of trends for 25-26, but this is a wildly economic-related revenue source. What do I mean by that? It depends on Article 44 sales tax being spent across the state, but it also depends on how much money the state has to pay for Durham County related Medicaid. Given all the chaos and things that are happening at different levels, I can't begin to tell you what that number may actually come in as. Remember, we budgeted $10 million. It may come in at $9 million. It may come in at $8 million. It may come in at $11 million. I don't see economic pressure supporting it growing. I do see economic pressure causing that revenue source for us going down. So that's not a great thing to think about, but in a chaotic environment, I want to be ultra conservative on how we budget our revenue so we don't get too far extended. Expenditure side, Claudia, the manager, has expressed to departments to urge control for spending and maximizing revenue source. We've said this a number of times in department head meetings. I think that position is clear to departments. We continue to have position freeze on non-mandated services, although we're keeping public safety and select DSS and public health positions exempt from that freeze. We have employee benefits costs that are continuing to rise at elevated rates, and we're going to have to do some further analysis. This is something I think you all need to understand that this number has doubled the amount we're paying for benefits in the last 10 years. It's averaging anywhere from 7 to 10% increases a year. That's an unsustainable increase for the county to take on. We can handle 1 year at a time, but if you average 10% a year, the amount's going to double in 7.2 years. If you average 7.2% increase a year, your amount's going to double in 10 years. We currently pay $50 million a year roughly in benefits for our employees. So can we handle a $25 to $50 million increase in that number annually? That's the annual amount over the next 10 years. That's something to be concerned about, and that's why it's on here. Inflation is driving increased baseline expenditures for utility, fuel, and we don't talk about this directly, but we will. It has really affected the cost of capital improvement plan projects. The cost of projects continue to rise every year, 10, 15% or more. Those are relatively conservative amounts that we have to take account of. I want to go to sales tax. I want to remind you all that sales tax is our second biggest revenue source the county collects. After that, it falls off tremendously. So Article 39, Article 46, and the ILA agreement we have with the city, that comes into our general fund and helps pay for benefits costs, helps pay for salary increases, helps pay for all your inflationary costs. This is a complicated graph. I can walk you through it, but what I want you to see is how much new money, these gray columns were new money that was budgeted year over year. So in 23-24, sales tax was doing gangbusters, largely to a lot of, related to a lot of ARPA funding being pushed through the system. So you all had, on top of increased money from property tax revenue, you had $13.39 million in new revenue in 23-24 to spend on new programs, expansion programs, or pay for benefits costs. However, in 24-25, looking at the end of that fiscal year, when I talked to you last year at the budget retreat, I said, I think we're going to make $75 million by the end of the year. It got worse when we had that budget, between when we had the budget retreats last year to the actual ending of the fiscal year. And now I estimate the general fund only collecting $72 million. So I budgeted 80, but we only collected 72. Remember I told you sales tax loss was 11 million. 9 million of it was in the general fund. When I made that $75 million estimate for you all, and I was making it for our office back when we did the budget retreat in February or March, I think when we had that time frame, I was estimating the county was going to have a budget of $82 million in 25-26. I actually lowered that a little bit from the time I talked to you all to $80.7 million. But my concern is that I don't know that we're even going to meet the $80.7 million amount that I have budgeted because we had such a bad budget year in 24-25. Why did we have a bad budget year? That is the great question. And I point this out to you to see gross collections. This is a number I look at. It's the single most important number that my office looks at for economic activity in Durham County. This is gross collections of sales tax before amounts are distributed to the county, before amounts are distributed to the city, before refunds are taken out from nonprofits like Duke. This is just an indicator of activity, economic activity. Look at the steady growth in Durham County gross sales tax collections from 2000. This is a 10-year look from 2015 to 2018. You see that slope? That's a gradual but growing slope. 1920 is when COVID happened, so the world kind of shut down and things went flat. But then look at how the slope changed from 1920 to 21, 22, in fact, 22, 23. You see, it grew at a significantly faster pace. But look at what has happened from 22, 23 through the end of 24, 25. That's practically 3 years where the number, the amount of gross sales tax collection for Durham County has stayed flat. That has never happened in the time that I have been here. That is also happening in an ultra-low unemployment rate system, in a relatively robust economic system in Durham County. It's held flat. I cannot tell you why it's held flat. I can only say that it has. That is concerning. It may be that we're reverting back to the mean. What do I mean by that? You see that dashed line, that sort of a slope of how the growth in sales tax was? If we had stayed on that slope and kind of take out the ARPA rocket fuel effect, you can see that we're roughly on the same slope that we were from the previous, but we hadn't budgeted that way. We got to a point and we continued budgeting more. All this to be said that this is one of the pressures that's going to be on our office to reassess where we budget sales tax for 26-27. This is not good news. This is particularly in a city and a county as vibrant as Durham County. This is the same information broken out by quarters. You can see there's quarterly variation, but if you look at that line, you can see it slowly growing. But look at it from quarter 2021-22, quarter 4. That's the months of, what is it? That's April, May, and June. From 2024, look at it. It's bounced around, but it hasn't grown. Again, I'm just pointing out to you that over 3 fiscal years, gross sales tax collection simply hasn't grown in Durham County. Why is that? What is happening? And more importantly, what do we budget for 26-27? So, leading into 26-27 budget development, with these sort of headwinds in front of us, that's concerning the manager, concerning my office, the CFO, all county-funded entities receiving recurring dollars will undergo significant base budget evaluations during the budget development process. Allocations will be evaluated for alignment within general statute requirements, local mandates, and BOCC priorities. Operational assessments and benchmark service costs will occur. Benchmarks will occur with peer jurisdictions where appropriate, just to see where we are in terms of comparison of funding and operations with similar type departments across the state. Contingency strategies will be developed to plan for potential shifts in federal, state, or local revenue streams. And departments will continue with John Kiefer's new office to refine key performance indicators. I want to show you all how much of it sounds like a almost $700 million budget has lots of rooms for savings, and in some ways it does, and in some ways it doesn't. What I want to point out to you here is how the budget can be thought about as broken up into dollar chunks for spending. $250 million, roughly, 36% of the budget, is allocated towards education-related services. That's DPS, DTC, pre-K, and Museum of Life and Science. So 36% of the budget goes to those things. Another 37, almost 38% goes to personnel required to support county services. Thanks to David Ades for making the slide. Appreciate it, David. This includes health benefits. So this is salary, overtime, FICA, Elger's retirement system, and benefits costs. That's 37%. If I'm doing the math, that's 64%. Am I right? 74%, almost getting close to 75% of the budget is taken up with education costs and personnel costs. Next, we have debt service payments. That's money transferred from the general fund to pay for school-related debt service in a different fund. That's another 8%. So we're in the 80+% range, 83, something like that, if I'm doing my math right. Check. And then we take in some other known operating costs that we have to take care of: elections, security, utilities, IEP. Those are economic development contracts we have. Risk management costs, the insurance and bonds we have to pay for our services that we provide. Alliance, money for mental health, and money for vehicles. That's another $30 million, so it's another 4% of our budget. The 6 largest department operating budgets: DSS, Public Health, Sheriff, Office of Emergency Services, General Services, and IST is another $61 million. All other departments' operating budget is $29 million. It's interesting when you look at this and you say, where can we make savings? You can't think of it easily in terms of $700 million available unless you're willing to consider reductions in education, willing to consider reductions or savings in some form or fashion around personnel costs, willing to consider operating cost reductions in some of the larger departments that have a lot of things they're going to need to be doing, particularly in less supportive economic environment. And what I'm trying to say is public health and DSS and OES tend to be needed even more when the economy is not doing great. So is that an area you're willing to look at? What I'm trying to convey to you all is there's really little room to make massive cuts unless you're looking at some of the high dollar groupings here.
Excuse me, Keith, that's a great slide just to show how complex this exercise is. And thank you, David, for grouping the categories in this way. In that personnel category, as you know, that's where all of our EMS workers are, our DSS workers, our public health workers. Disproportionately, we are a service organization. Part of the work that we will do collectively is looking at, well, are there ways that we can continue to become more efficient? Because we have 100 counties across the state, and some may be doing some of their work more efficiently than we are. So when you're in a situation and you have declining resources and increased pressures, you definitely have to look within and as well as externally to figure out how do we go forward. So this will be a very involved process, but we want to make sure that we're very thoughtful and intentional how we do our work, and it will take some time. So we just ask the board's patience as we reevaluate how we're doing our business and in trying to make sure, most important, that we are being responsive to our residents and for those things that we're required to do, and also those priority areas of the budget. Thanks, Keith.
Yes, ma'am. Commissioner Burton.
Yeah, I just wanted to add to that, you know, me coming from public education, that's what makes it tricky about education, is because you have to have a minimum of staff in a building. You have to have a custodial staff, school lunch staff, the child nutrition staff, administration staff. It's service oriented. So, you know, it's very, you know, I would tell people all the time, it's not the supplies, it's the people in the building providing the services to the children. So I just wanted to add that.
Some key performance indicators. Our office will work closely with the new organizational effectiveness department run by my neighbor here to the right, John Kiefer, and to connect relevance KPIs, key performance indicators, to department budgets. These KPIs will help identify the efficiency and effectiveness of programs and services while also highlighting areas where more detailed analysis needs to be. This is one of several tools the county is going to use by management departments to evaluate program and service effectiveness in a belt-tightening environment. I will say you cannot balance the budget and fix the budget only on operating costs of certain departments. As I related on this back slide, only 4% of the budget is related to all other departments' operating budget. That is a place that management will look. We always look there, have looked there for the last several years to make reductions in operating budgets, but we are limited without looking at some of the bigger ticket items. I want to show you the Durham County tax rate. This is 33 years of Durham County tax rate. Starting in 1993-94, the tax rate was 90 cents. We had a revenue reval that year, and it went down to 87.4%. What is more interesting to look at is the percentage increase year over year of the tax rate. And what I want to note real quickly to you all is the last 2 years, 24-25's tax rate increase percentage-wise, and 25-26. Look at those two numbers, 6% and 6% compared to the last 33 years. What is happening? We are having to, by choices made by management and the board and departments, we are having to support our budget more and more through property tax revenue. Why? Because sales tax revenue, our sales tax revenue, as I showed you earlier, is flattening out. We don't have that new revenue. You continue to need new revenue to support Durham Public Schools, to support operational budgets, to support new requests that come to you like two that have already come to you today. But the way you're doing it, the way we're doing it, is raising the property tax rate. Claudia?
I just want to really highlight one other factor, though, Keith. It's not just that the sales tax revenues are flatter, it's that we are receiving less state funding and less federal funding for the things that we need to do for our community. So there's been a bigger and bigger burden on us at the local level to fund things like public education and repairs for our schools. So I just think it's important to have that bigger context of what we're also seeing is the burden falling on us here at the local level to take care of things that used to be provided by the state or the federal government.
That's a great comment, Commissioner Jacobs. I remember that some time ago there used to be statewide bonds for schools, and it's been some time since that has occurred. The decline in revenue sources, whether it is sales taxes or others, coupled with increased pressures of population growth, which is a great situation to be in, that we're in a region that's growing. Many places in the state, they're declining. And so I'm grateful we have that challenge, but the pressures that's happening on our tax base are some that we will not be able to sustain. So as we plan for next year's budget, we're trying to keep in mind the tax burdens as we have these conversations, but also knowing the community desires a certain level of service. So balancing that act is a careful one.
And we're already seeing new cuts in federal funding, like with the DIME program and now with Medicaid. And so again, it's that double whammy of things like decline and what we saw with sales tax, with the burden of how are we going to take care of these critical needs for people.
We're also losing a lot of federal research dollars. We are a research hub in this county and the RTP. And those dollars, while I can't see it yet, those pay high dollar salaries that people live in Durham County and they do research work at Duke or at Central or Carolina or State, and they mix and match, and it's all out in the RTP as well. And I'm deeply concerned about the downward economic pressure of people losing federal dollars flowing through research groups that are just the salaries and people living. We haven't seen that yet. I don't know how much worse that is going to get. Again, chaos makes me tend to get more conservative, and that's what I'm trying to convey to you, the concerns that we're having, or at least the ones I'm conveying to Manager Hager. Some key budget takeaways for 26-27 that I would like for y'all to remember. We have slowing revenue and quickening expenditure growth. This is not a new statement. I have made this for the last 3 years, but I can say it's getting worse. Revenues are not keeping up with the expenditure needs you all are facing, that we all are facing. Not to mention the new things that come in front of you every time you meet, not unlike today, 2 different things that are asking you to plan for future funding. But in this environment, you all need to be concerned about what you can say yes to. Economic indicators point to potential for further challenges. I just noted that with the loss of federal money, why is our sales tax flattening out in a relatively good economy? If the economy gets much worse, will we see that decrease? We need to consider long-term sustainability. I would ask each and every commissioner in here, every time you get an ask for a new request for funding, that you say how much and how do you think we're going to pay for it, and consider that, because we have to pay for it long-term, not just one time. For example, this rail trail is a one-time purchase, but then you're planning to take on significant costs in the future and then in perpetuity keeping that up. Begin prioritizing early. Management and the board need to be talking now and potentially at a policy retreat about what you are prioritizing. What does prioritizing mean? It means the word no may need to enter into the vocabulary here and there in a gentle but strong way, fiscally responsible way. We have some difficult decisions coming for the board and for management. We need to begin strategic discussions immediately. That's why we're starting with this meeting, and we'll continue as much as the manager sees fit. We will continue monitoring quarterly reports For early warning signs, we'll be having a quarterly report coming out mid-November that goes from July, August, and September, mid-October, if I'm correct, Heather. We'll get that first quarterly report out in the next couple of weeks. We have a limited use of FY 25-26 mid-year fund balance amendments. What I mean by that is we have gotten used to going to the well, our savings account, on a regular basis as people come and say they have emergency needs or their new needs. Can we appropriate fund balance? Why, yes, we can appropriate it, but as I've said earlier, our fund balance amounts have gotten tighter, and when you not just is the wrong word, when we make the decision to spend some of that fund balance mid-year, we only make that overall fund balance amount even tighter. So it's just something that needs to be in the forefront of your mind. Oh, we're digging into our savings account again to spend on something. Is that the right thing to do? Are we setting ourselves up for long-term fiscal costs related to this one-time use of fund balance? We ultimately, I think it's the manager's hope, and it is my hope, that we will prioritize long-term fiscal sustainability. We're going to have to make it through these years, through this unknown, in a way that we can come out on the end of it and still be supportive of the citizens in the way we need to be. What's the budget process look like? Tentative. This is a very early sort of budget calendar. December or January, possible policy retreat with the board. January and February, we'll have department budget input. What I mean by that, they'll literally be creating their budgets and putting it into the system as we collate that budget. February, we have our BOCC annual budget retreat, where, as Commissioner Alam noted, I'm always doom and gloom, and will probably be some form or fashion of that again. Also, we will have February, we'll open up the budget portal for public opinions, public statements on what they think the key budget areas of need are. March 1st through March 31st is when departments get a chance to meet with Manager Hager and propose their budget request for the upcoming fiscal year. March, we'll also have advanced public comments at a board meeting. We have to do that by state law. And in early May, the manager, usually around the second week in May, the manager presents her recommended budget. And then in mid-May and through June, you'll have the board budget work sessions. And in early June, usually the first or second week in June, we will hopefully approve this budget. We can get through this together, but you got to make some hard decisions. And I think it's Manager Hager's department's job to make that at first, and then we will present them to you all, but those same hard decisions will ultimately end up on your desk in front of you. Capital Improvement Plan update. The CIP, we used to we'd go quiet for a couple of years and we would do a biannual CIP update. And that process has changed because the cost of CIP projects have changed so quickly, and the admittance of new projects and projects changing consistently. To what I'm trying to say is that the CIP has largely turned into an annually updated document, and we're going to come back to you with that annually updated document after we get some vetting with our financial coordinator, Doug Carter and Associates. But project costs change rapidly. We have new planned and unplanned projects to consider annually, and just the change in scope and cost changes, that makes it where we can't really wait 2 years and have a price frozen. It just doesn't work that way anymore. The current CIP will need to establish a potential GEO-bond referendum amount for DPS, DTCC, the museum, and the county, if we so choose. We currently have an estimated GEO-bond referendum for 2026. Again, economic realities and choices out in the real world may decide whether we continue to do that in 2026 or do it later. I'm not proposing anything right now. We have it in I'm just saying that's the time it's set for right now. But we have to figure out the amounts we want to do. But in figuring out the amounts, you have to figure out the amount of debt service payments the county is willing to take on in the future based off of that GEO-bond referendum. I'm sure the schools will give a significant number, and we will try to respond to that, but it has a cost to us out a couple of years later. The cost of CIP debt-related service, I think I just said, may rise significantly in the next 5 years, depending on the size of the GEO-bond referendum. The updated CIP will be presented to the board in the near future, hopefully before the budget process starts, because part of the CIP is how much annual debt service we need to pay for 26, 27, and I need to get some clarification on that depending on some projects that are still out there that need decisions made. That is the CIP process. I will be quiet and let you all ask questions.
Thank you all so much. Manager Hager, do you want to go first?
No, I thank you, Keith and David and your team, for your work and all you do, and the department, because they're the ones also very close to this process. As Keith shared, we've started some of our work a couple of months ago looking at revenue streams. When we saw shifts at the federal and state level, it put out a warning sign that we needed to revisit what we're doing and how we're doing it so that we could make sure the highest priorities in serving our residents could still occur. We thank the board for hearing from us. We will share additional information with you. Excited about the work that will happen in John's shop and his team with looking at our KPIs and refining our performance measures. We heard from you in the budget development process for last year's budget about our need to refine that work, and so it's a lot that will be happening, but we are up for the task, and again, thank you for working with us through this season.
Thank you so much, Manager Hager, and yes, ditto to thank you all for all of the work that you guys do in the budget office, and obviously our department staff that execute all the programs. I know we get to make quote-unquote easy decisions of how we spend the money, but y'all are the ones who actually manage it on a day-to-day basis. So thank you for all of that. I know Manager Hager and we've talked about this, and I definitely see and I hear you, Keith, about the ways that we can find savings. And I know I've talked about zero-based budgeting and all of that, and it's not necessarily a thing that I'm thinking about for us to find cost saving measures, but just an exercise. And I know, Manager Hager, you said like there's been KPIs that have been established to roll out of just a practice for us of we are using, and this is not just 7 departments, that we're using taxpayer dollars to be able to provide them more transparency of, hey, we're reviewing these programs that we fund, we're reviewing these services to make sure they're up to the standard that we as a board want, but also that our residents want. And doing that as like an overhaul of all of our programs and services, because I think we may not find cost savings or things to cut through that process, but we may find that there are similar programs being funded that could be communicating better with each other, or that there is something that we're funding or a nonprofit that we're supporting that we're also supporting a different nonprofit here, and they're not communicating with each other, and trying to get them to get together. If they're serving the same population, they should be working together. And I think that really happens if we get down to the bare bones and work our way back up.
I do firmly believe that, sort of based on the scenario that you're hearing right now, regardless of what it's called, we are going to have to look at what's in the base. Some of the framework information that I shared in a separate communication with the board captured an exercise that we did about 5-6 years ago when we took the budget and we looked, well, what's statutorily required, what's required from a local mandate, and then putting the dollars into those buckets, and then isolating the broadest category, what's sort of board priority or areas that we have done consistently over many years. Some version of that exercise has to happen right now because the numbers that Keith talked about, all those sales taxes are, I consider this almost a correction from the standpoint. There was such an infusion of infrastructure dollars that happened a few years ago during the COVID virus and the economic recovery. Some of this is stabilization. So if you look at the trends, if you saw where there was the sales tax trend of where we were back in, I guess it was 2015, 16, it may have been around 170 million. Now we're at 270, so that's tremendous growth. So even if it's slowed some from from an economic stability perspective, we're still such a strong economy. On the expense side, we've just grown fast and a lot. And so, to your point, figuring out, well, how do we become different on the expense side will require deep dives into almost every corner. And unfortunately, the convergence of some of the shifts from external revenues, but also, most importantly, from where I am looking at it, some policy shifts that the pressures will roll downhill from a local government perspective. Some of the shifts that may occur may mean that the community may look to us. The question is, will we have the dollars to close the gaps? And in most cases, the response will probably be, we just don't have it. We've been very clear with nonprofits that received funds through the ARPA appropriation that those funds were only for a short period of time, and they have been respectful of that. We funded very few projects that would be considered recurring, and those would be in the categories related to the schools or for child care. Otherwise, everyone is clear, it was either a one-time or the funds have ended or will end soon. We'll get through it, but to your point, we're gonna have to look at every way the dollars are spent. How do we benchmark with others? I'll often say benchmarking against yourself is a story, but how do you compare to others is another one. So we will be doing lots of that. Some of that work has already started, and we look forward to coming back, and we hear you loud and clear about the zero-based budget.
Yes, thank you so much, Manager Hager. And then I had one more question of how, with the health benefits, have we gotten data from like other local governments about, are they seeing these same cost increases for the health benefits for their employees? Is anyone able to find a vendor that has been able to provide?
We will follow up on that. That is something that we're benchmarking. We did some comparisons. There are a couple of things with benefits. One, what are your prices? Who's on your plan, and how much are you covering? Those are a couple of separate buckets. That's probably another different conversation, but we are looking at how our costs compare. We are a very we have a generous plan. We could afford it a few years ago. We may not be able to afford it at the version it is at now, but we'll come back to the board in a couple of months with more details with that as far as some benchmark information. That's a very complex question. If you read headlines, most are struggling with their benefits cost, and we are no different. But there are some ways, I imagine, that we can find some different ways to make it more affordable, and revisiting how much burden of the plan is owned by the county versus the employee, because that mix is different too. When I was working with the state, I had a much higher deductible than where I am now, and then I had a much different type of benefit offering as well. So all those factors are there. We'll bring those back to the board for consideration.
Thank you. And then my last question is, I haven't brought this up with a bunch of stuff. I know I talked to Attorney Williamson and Manager Hager about it, about in what ways does Durham County, do we invest in state bonds? I know we talked about
finance, yeah.
That's finance? Oh, okay.
Yeah.
But yeah, were you able to look at
We're going to get you the response for that. We do make investment. We have an investment portfolio and a strategy. She's not here. She could answer it right off the top of her head, but we'll get that information to you.
Okay.
Yes.
That'd be great. Thank you. Okay, Commissioner Britton.
Yes, thank you all for your presentation, and I know we're having a discussion, and I know, Chair Alam, you're really focused on zero-based budgeting. I don't know if I'm fully on board, and I'll tell you why. I know when I come from the schools, the education, and I remember this discussion. We had this discussion when I was teaching maybe 20, 25 years ago about the schools going to zero-based budgeting. Because one of the things, and I said it earlier, about it's a service-oriented business. So with the schools, and I imagine it's the same with the county, is that you have people doing the work. So if you look at a budget and you look at it, it's okay, you have a person in that position. With the schools, if we're not going to do this service anymore, with the schools, you can just move somebody, okay, because we're certified in something. So if I have an assistant principal, we don't need an AP at that building, okay, they can go back into the classroom. So I guess I need to be sold a little bit on it. I do like the idea about we're looking at our operating budget, we're looking at what we provide and figuring out where do we have services that are duplicate and making sure we streamline. So that's just how I'm thinking about it. But I do like, the idea of us thinking about those things, especially because we're in this chaotic environment, what's happening at the state and the federal level. We're not sure about where our money is coming from, if we're going to get these funds. And we don't always want to put this burden of taxation on our residents. So I would like for us to talk about that a little bit more, to understand the processes and things like that. So, thanks.
Commissioner Jacobs?
Thank you. I'm really glad that we're starting early on these conversations, and I think that to the point of where we started with, Rod and Maggie giving us kind of an update on some things happening with funding and programs, I do feel like we're probably going to need even almost like a weekly check-in, because just on related to public health and DSS, because my question is what, for instance, in what you shared today, Rod, about the cuts for the two programs that were cut, I'm thinking, okay, I see the dollars, but what I want to understand is what does this really mean in terms of like how many people may be impacted, what services or programs are going to be impacted. So I think it's important for us to not just look at the numbers, but like what is that really translating into? And that's what I'm really concerned about. For instance, with the WIC program, I know that we got an email from Lincoln as a board member, Maggie and I, saying that they have set aside funding. This was last week, and we have some funding to hold us over, but that's what a lot of it is going to be. So when I mean about, I'm not meaning like we need to have these extensive reports, but I think we're going to need to know about things, how we can be nimble and respond and all work together when we're really talking about like somebody not having food, not having medicine, not having housing. I also got an update from the Hope Department, which is because I'm on the HSAC, because some of the HUD funding has been impacted. And so people are wondering, okay, how is this going to affect money that's paying rents right now, or, vouchers or whatever. So we're all just going to have to be really communicating and collaborating. And I know, for instance, I don't know when you all meet at a leadership level with the city and the schools. I was actually at an event with the school board chair yesterday and asked her, when are you all meeting next? Because this is also like a leadership with the staff and our leadership for each of our boards about how we can all be working together around these issues. So
no, that's a great comment. I would like to say I appreciate how Dr. Jenkins and Maggie both keep us informed. As soon as they get the information, they forward it to their respective boards, and we send it often to commissioners. Trying to figure out the systematic way of doing that is something we can definitely figure out. If my memory is right, it's almost 125,000 individuals that receive some type of direct or indirect service through DSS. For public health, if my memory was right, it was about 27,000, but another 30-some that have education type services. I may have my numbers off there. There's a lot of stakeholders that receive services through our human services entities. And I know to your point and the rest of the board is, how do we make sure those highest and most pressing needs are still met? The challenge is, from a budget perspective, how we may have challenges closing gaps. But if it's a board's priority, if, we would have to figure out, well, what do I stop on the expense side to cover this other expense that's happening? And that would be the question that happened. So there are ways we tighten our belt, whether it's slowing travel or freezing positions. There are lots of ways that we can control the budget. And you will note last year, that's what we had to do. And that's what we've been doing. So from a policy perspective, it will be a shared ownership in how we get through this. And that's part of the reason we're also doing those reviews right now, to make sure we're clear, or we'll start doing some of them. Well, what is clearly mandated to do, and what are those things that are nice things to do, and how do we get through this season, because it is a season. I'm optimistic that things will become different, but while we're in this phase, especially the unknowns, we do have to be very strategic in how we manage.
Yeah. And I'll just say, I'm going to be an optimist here too, and say that I think one of the ways forward is going to be through collaboration and coordination, communication with not just the city, our other governments, the city and the Board of Education, but also with the private sector and all of our partners. I think the Rail Trail project is a great example of that, where we have partnered with a lot of different folks. We're leveraging a lot of different resources. Our staff has gotten a lot of grants, and I'm going to push back on you, Keith. When we look at big picture, and our job is to look big picture, we're not just thinking about now. We also have to be planning for Durham. That's our challenge as elected officials. We have to be looking at this moment in time, but also looking 20, 30, 40 years in the future. And the rail trail, and right now we're focusing on just securing the corridor. Again, we may not spend money on it for a long time, but that's an economic development investment. That's, if we're going to look at how we have future revenues, we didn't even talk about tourism as a possible asset for that. But these are the types of things where if we want to increase our sales tax revenue, we also have to invest, and related to our CIP. So I think that's also for something in our board to think about, because I'm thinking when you're talking about how do we understand our sales tax revenue, and I think it is important for us to dig in with all of our partners on that. And it is a national trend, and I like the fact that you showed us on that graph that we're also not far off if we're just on a steady growth. But we're investing in Durham Next. The whole purpose of Durham Next with our occupancy tax dollars is for that entity to focus on festivals and a new convention center and a sports facility. These are all things that hopefully will help us grow our economy. So yes, we are in this moment now, but we can't forget about investments we have to make in the future of our community at the same time. So I just want to put that out there. KPIs, I really appreciate what you sent us with that long list of the KPIs.
And we will refine.
And I also wondering, John, how you are thinking about our strategic plan goals, because I'm really interested in KPIs that are not just around like output, but also about the outcomes that we want to see in moving the needle on the goals that we have in the county. So I'm just wondering how you're thinking about that, the strategic plan goals interfacing with the KPIs.
Well, the process of creating linkages and alignments with the strategic plan and the existing performance measures, and as well as any new measures that would need to be created pursuant to that process, had already been initiated prior to the development of the new department. We are currently reviewing and updating the strategic plan in light of a lot of the changes that are going on, which has kind of paused that a little bit, but we plan to finalize that process with the county attorney's office soon and move forward with continuing along that line. I think, as the manager noted, we have an extensive existing base of performance indicators that we will continue to evaluate through intensive conversations with department staff. It's going to be a partnership. But I think the point you highlight on is the key. There's going to be some measures. Outputs matter, and there's going to be some measures, but we do want to focus on those measures that are outcome oriented. And so we're going to be spending a lot of time helping departments understand the distinctions between those concepts, to examine the existing measures, to identify where we might have gaps in relation to that distinction, and make sure that we are filling those gaps with high quality measures that will capture outcomes for department level activities and investments. But it's, we're beginning to map out our engagement strategy for the current fiscal year, to start having those conversations with the departments in coordination with the budget cycle, so that as we get into the spring, we're in a much stronger place. Starting with the strategic plan and trickling all the way down to, as we've talked about the mandates, we've talked about, all the different types of activities and the drivers behind them, so that we have a comprehensive performance evaluation framework, not just one that is focused at certain specific levels.
And how do you envision those with the budget, kind of interfacing with the budget staff and what's in our budget book? Because it would be great if will we see a change in the budget book so that we're actually seeing more of those? Yeah. Okay.
And I think we're going to look at differentiated reporting opportunities as well, right? I think we also want to be cognizant of what we focus on in the budget book. That's one way to communicate, right? And so I think we're going to look for other opportunities to provide information to decision makers that may go beyond the confines of the budget book, but that may support and supplement that as well.
Okay, because I'm thinking about what's going to be public facing too, because we want the community to also see, to Chair Alam's point, how we're doing and how we're spending taxpayer dollars and all of that. So, and what people are getting.
So what we can do is come back at the December work session with an update on that framework and what it looks like. To John's point, we have quite a few measures. We need to refine the ones that we're focused on and make sure that we aren't missing some. And but we can come back for those conversations.
Okay, great. And I just want to highlight that, to Commissioner Burton's point, there's a lot of the parts of our budget that are mandated services. And honestly, a lot of the things that are discretionary are really the key programs that this board has created. Things like the Durham Pre-K and our long-term low-income homeowner relief program. And these are programs that we hold near and dear to our heart. Project Build, our recovery court, our mental health court, a lot of the things that we're so proud of in Durham County, and we are not going to want to give those things up. I think it's also, we really need to face up to that a lot of our transformational progressive programs are discretionary and being funded by local funding. And I think also, I don't want to be a Debbie Downer, but even the conversation this morning with our, chief public defender, like those are creating new positions, funding a new court. Those are all going to be local burdens. And, I know there's so many things that we want to do, but that is the reality of what we're talking about right now. And I think what would also be helpful for us is, I know we've talked about this before, but even for us as a board to have a rubric around decision-making for new programs or positions for decision-making, because when you look at our budget, and thank you, David, for that chart, when we have 38% of our budget being for personnel, we really have to be asking ourselves tough questions if we want to be creating new positions rather than reallocating existing positions. We really have to. I think that would be helpful for me personally to have that rubric. And then thinking about the nonprofit funding process, I know we've talked about staff coming back with a proposal of how we move forward as the ARPA funding goes away. And I don't know if you all is that part of what you are doing, John?
No, well, I mean, I would imagine the grant side of organizational effectiveness has been involved in administering the ARPA funds, but we have not, and we would certainly be happy to participate and share what we've learned through our experience, but we have not been a part of that conversation.
And then I guess for that, we would revisit lessons learned from the past, and the budget team has been involved with that. It was a very small amount of money that we allocated for it, but many lessons learned in navigating the ARPA grant cycle. So to John's point, and it all goes back, from my seat with my policy hat, what is the return on the investment on any dollar we spend? And I think that sort of wraps a lot of what you were saying,
yes,
from the investments from pre-K to other special initiatives.
Yes.
What are the investments? What are the outcomes? Are they moving the needle? If we were to do longitudinal studies, can we see that those investments have helped with upward economic mobility? Those are the kinds of things we can't do immediately, but would like to, in developing an infrastructure, do a different job in how we're telling that story and explaining to our taxpayers.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, because we've had a focus on this board in upstream investments, investing in early childhood, and knowing that will, the idea is to save, investing on the front end and in that way. So I think, and it may take a very long time to see those ROIs for things like that too. But, and I also just think big picture, I think helping maybe some strategies, like, one I just talked about, the partnerships and looking for other sources of money, which our staff is so good at, but also, things that we do normally, which is things like with our CIP, I'm getting into the weeds here, but, you know, we've always done like state-of-the-art green building, you know, LEED certified. I mean, we may not be able to do that. If we need a new animal shelter, we may not have to do something that's more value engineering or whatever we're trying to build. That's just an example. And then also really evaluating some of our assets. We have a lot of assets that are just sitting here, like the old DSS building, the Boys and Girls Club. How do we really leverage the public land? Things like that. So again, being proactive around, and that's going to take the collaboration part. So it's just a bigger strategy, I think, to get us more nimble at getting through the economic future we're facing. So thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Jacobs. And just to provide clarification, I know in the emails that I've sent about zero-based budgeting, I've always said that it wouldn't be true zero-based budgeting because we do have those statutory requirements. So that would be the zero, would be that statutory requirements. And again, it's not to institute any sort of cuts, but just sort of this reflection of also highlighting exactly what you said, Commissioner Jacobs. Like, I don't think residents understand how much we go above and beyond with our programs. Like, they know, but I think that scale of that pre-K is funded majority locally. I don't think folks understand that grasp, and being able to go through an exercise like this will help us with our communications and pushing it out, and also advocating at the federal and state level that county governments cannot continue to carry this burden, that we need them to step in. Thank you. Hey, well, thank you all so much. That comes to the conclusion of our agenda. Is there anything else? Okay.
It's lunchtime.
Yes, we are adjourned. And then we'll have agenda prep here. Okay.